Damn, man. A barbarian stone? If something like that existed in real life, it'd be absolutely awesome. It all happened during a school field trip to a cave. Suddenly, the mysterious stone grabbed the boy's head. It sent him flying like an ant falling off a leaf. Everyone was in shock. How the hell is this guy still alive? Wasn't it supposed to be just a rock? I'd be more worried about whether the kid survived. The barbarian looked at his status screen, and now he was the only barbarian left in the world. Just then, 4 hunters surrounded him. The others rushed over to check if the guy who got launched was still alive. The barbarian had no idea what was going on. One of the hunters tried to show him his ID, as if someone who had been frozen for 20,000 years would understand any of that. So the barbarian simply grabbed him by the neck, and that was the end of that. Then a woman arrived and called him by his name, Wolfgang. He let the poor guy go and walked toward the woman, wanting to know how she knew his name. But in reality, she was trying to bribe him with pizza and Coca-Cola. To understand how this barbarian ended up in the modern era like Captain America, we have to go back to the past. He made a pact with the angels and gained a special power. He spent his days slaughtering the demons of that world. He was an immortal barbarian warrior, the true monster of the world. Just his presence alone was enough to make demons wet their pants. In his final battle, 10,000 demons stood before him. Even knowing it was a trap, he still came. The demon who had laughed at his family's death was there. In that place, he no longer had the angel's blessing, but that wasn't what made him a monster. He surpassed his limits and grew stronger with every battle. Just like Goku, after a colossal fight, only one demon remained. Its life was hanging by the edge of his blade. But just as Wolfgang was about to land the final blow, Devil House activated an ancient spell, absolute petrification. And that was how the world's strongest barbarian ended up in the modern age. Now imagine this. He's so gigantic that he can barely fit inside a car, let alone find clothes that fit. Just picture yourself riding in a tiny car, with a nearly naked giant barbarian squeezed into the seat, and a woman sitting right next to him. Yeah, you definitely need a Coke after that. Then, an energy envelops Wolfgang's body and transports him to another location. Arriving in a modern city, he comments that the world has changed a lot and asks where they are going. Yeren replies that they're heading to the Hunters Association. Wolfgang then asks what a hunter is. She explains they are people trained to fight monsters from portals, managed by their association. As a car approaches, Yeren continues explaining that high-ranking demons are managed by government agencies, and they deal with the weaker monsters. Once inside the vehicle, she reveals that, with government support, they discover and train new hunters, and that he was part of this project, which surprises him. As they get out of the car, Yeren confesses they thought he was just a statue, but later realized he was a warrior petrified by a curse. While walking through the lobby, Wolfgang asks her to continue. Yeren explains that there aren't many S-rank hunters to fight the growing number of demons. Inside the elevator, she begins to say that when she found him petrified, she thought that maybe... Noticing the pause, Wolfgang asks her why she stopped talking. The woman just remains silent with a distant look. Soon, Wolfgang stares at the open box, carefully observing the unfamiliar food. The woman then informs him that it's called pizza and invites him to eat, assuring him it's delicious. As he tries the food, Yeren explains that they tried to break the curse with healing hunters, but the demon's power was too strong. Surprised, Wolfgang comments that it's incredibly delicious and wonders how they can make food with such flavor. He then points to the bottle on the table and asks what that drink is. Yeren replies that it's a drink called cola and encourages him to try it as the taste goes well with pizza. So, the barbarian tips the bottle and drinks the dark liquid all at once. Curious, the woman asks him what it tastes like and if he liked it. He says the fizz in his throat startled him at first, but the drink is cold, refreshing, and also very delicious. With a relieved smile, Yeren says she's glad he liked it and encourages him to eat as much as he wants. With that, she asks to pose a few questions, and after he agrees, she asks if he's noticed that this era is different from his own. Wolfgang confirms he has, and says that all the landscapes seen from inside the carriage were completely new to him. Yeren then explains that they're in the 21st century, and asks what year of his era he lived in. Confused, the barbarian asks what AD means, as he doesn't know the term. So, Yeren asks for a reference, and Wolfgang replies that when he was born, they said 1,000 years had passed since Romulus founded Rome. With a jump, Yeren exclaims she knew it and can find out more on the Hunter's Gallery app, while Wolfgang asks what's happening. She then celebrates that her theory was correct and that it's now the 21st century. Yeren then says she can't believe she's talking to someone from the Middle Ages and that as an archaeologist hunter, this is incredibly exciting. Not understanding, Wolfgang complains he doesn't know what she's talking about and just asks for another box of pizza. After stacking several empty boxes, he finally comments that he's starting to feel satisfied. He then states that since demons also appear here, he understands the situation and asks where he can find Devil House. Yeren asks what Devil House is, and the barbarian explains it was the one who turned turned him to stone. With that, she asks for a moment to check the Hunter's Gallery app, and Wolfgang comments that she does the strangest things. Yeren then shows him her phone and says there's no information, asking if he's sure Devil House is a monster. Wolfgang confirms that, to be exact, it's a demon that escaped during his last battle. He then declares that as soon as he destroys it, he will return to Germania and his family. Yeren then calls out to him, saying he needs to understand the reality of his situation, as Germania has already fallen. Surprised, Wolfgang repeats the word, and the woman explains that his land is now ruled by a nation called Norway. The barbarian reflects on the 1,000 years and asks if everything from that era now exists only as history, and she confirms it does. With this revelation, he clenches his fist in a gesture of pure frustration. With that, he smashes the glass wall, which shatters on impact. Through the hole, he declares that he must get his family back. Yeren then tries to argue that even if he finds them, they would already be. With his back to her, Wolfgang cuts her off, stating he can get them back because that was the condition of the contract. He then asks if she can find Devil House. She then assures him that if it's a demon and it's still active, they will definitely find it. Faced with her promise, Wolfgang turns around and proposes they make a deal. He continues, saying she waited for him to wake up for a reason, and that he will cooperate to help her achieve her goal. He then lays out his one condition, that she do everything in her power to find Devil House. Yeren explains that since he has no citizenship, it would be difficult for him to act, but there is a way, obtaining a hunter's license. She then adds that, fortunately, he seems to have the qualifications. Wolfgang comments that they live complicated lives. As they get in the car, the woman mentions there are many benefits to becoming a hunter, and he asks what they are. She replies that they provide housing based on rank and financial support. He questions if that means money. Yeren then says if he passes the exam, he'll receive 10 million won. But there's something better, the chance to form a contract with a constellation. As a sign for an arena appears, Wolfgang asks what a constellation is. She explains they are guardian deities of the stars. Finally, Yeren states that constellations favor talented people and watch over them, sparing no support in their endeavors. Wolfgang comments that he knows of angels, but has never heard of constellations. Yeren explains that it makes sense, as they only appeared 15 years ago. Seeing the crowd, he asks if everyone there is trying to become a hunter. She confirms it's the promotion exam day for the academy students. Yeren then points to a large wall in the center of the stage and asks if he sees it. She explains that it's called the Wall of Trial and is imbued with the power of Leonidas. To pass, one must score over 500 points. Wolfgang then comments that the wall looks like it would break with a simple touch, as Yeren guides him to the registration desk. At the counter, the clerk asks for the candidate's name. Yeren informs him that his full name is Wolfgang, the Uva. The man explains that a foreigner without a passport needs a sponsor. Yeren offers herself, which is accepted after she presents her license. As a warrior with a spear approaches, Wolfgang asks what that is. Yeren replies that it's the spear of the constellation Leonidas. She then details that as soon as the spear is inserted into the pedestal in front of the wall, the power of Leonidas will flow into it. Next, the warrior raises the weapon, which begins to glow with an intense energy. With that, the spear's power is fired directly at the wall of trial. The energy then spreads across the wall, activating the magical patterns on its surface. Amidst the crowd, Wolfgang comments that they certainly make a big fuss about it. Soon, an evaluator calls for silence and announces that the assessment will begin. Wolfgang then watches the power flowing and expresses his surprise as he recognizes that energy. Two status screens appear, stating that the constellation Leonidas has found an interesting individual and urges them to take the exam immediately. The crowd reacts with surprise at the constellation's eagerness, wondering who caught its attention. The examiner then calls the first participant, Go Yuna of the Blue Dragon family, to step forward. As she walks forward, a spectator recognizes her as a member of the famous hunter family, led by the spearmaster Go Seong Young. Seeing the constellation's aura around her, everyone remarks that the Blue Dragon family never disappoints and wonders if she already has a provisional contract. The examiners comment that it's no surprise the eagerness has shown itself, and that with any luck, they might see an official contract signed. Go Yuna then prepares, concentrating her energy into her hand for an attack. She then unleashes a powerful blast of energy directly at the wall. Soon after, the panel displays her final score, 1,254. Wolfgang asks if that's a good score, and Yeren explains it's on par with active hunters, a rare feat in a promotion exam. With a smile, Go Yuna wonders who else the hero Leonidas could be looking for but her. However, two new messages from Leonidas appear, demanding the next participant be sent for the test immediately. Surprised, Go Yuna questions what's happening, wondering if the call wasn't for her. Then, her own constellation expresses disappointment in her skills and terminates the contract it had with her. In disbelief, she murmurs that this can't be happening until a hand touches her shoulder. Another participant shoves her and tells her not to just stand there, questioning why the constellation would be interested in her when he's around. He then states she should be grateful she even got a provisional contract, but now even that is gone. The crowd then recognizes him as Kim Jin-woo, and a spectator comments that if he's stepping up, the call definitely wasn't for Go Yuna. A screen then announces that the constellation, descendant of the Barbarians, is lending its power to Kim Jin-woo, significantly boosting his strength. With energy enveloping his body, he declares that as long as he's here, no one else will be the star of the show. He then strikes the wall, yelling that the constellation's call is meant for him. Surprised by the force of the impact, the examiners shield themselves, wondering if that's really the level of a student. With the scoreboard showing 2,039 points, Jin-woo boasts about the insane feat, questioning how he managed to break the 2,000 mark. He then claims that since he was the first to reach such a score, it's no wonder the constellation's call appeared. The examiners comment that this score is equivalent to a C-rank hunter, and one of them admits Jin-woo might be stronger than him. With that, Kim Jin-woo turns to the wall and asks the Lord Constellation if that isn't proof enough that he's the hero it was looking for. Suddenly, his eyes turn white as he connects with the entity. A new message appears, informing them of the wrath of the constellation Leonidas. It roars with anger, forcing Jin-woo to his knees. On the ground, he questions Lord Leonidas, not understanding the reason for the fury. His own constellation then scolds him for his confidence, asking what's going on and reminding him that he guaranteed Leonidas would be pleased. Soon, a message from a hero who claims to have killed thousands of demons manifests on the wall. Then, the voice yells that it doesn't care how many he killed and what that has to do with the current mess. Wolfgang then approaches Kim Jin-woo and tells him to get lost, as he's not the one the constellation is looking for. Annoyed, Jin-woo asks what the old man said and tells him to wait his turn, since it's not even his exam day. The Barbarian then asks if his turn isn't already over, advising him to get lost while he's still asking nicely. At this, the young man grabs Wolfgang's shoulder and asks if he's joking. Wolfgang just turns his head, looking away with indifference. Then, his gaze shifts to the crowd, in the direction of Kang Yeren. The woman looks back at him with a nervous and worried expression. With that, Wolfgang turns to the young man with a determined look. He asks if his constellation is the descendant of the Barbarians, and Jin-woo demands he apologize for not using the title of Lord. Then, Jin-woo pokes him in the chest, claiming he isn't someone a nobody like Wolfgang can disrespect. He continues, warning that if he acts arrogantly and angers the constellation, someone like him will end up dead. With a slight smile, Wolfgang interrupts him and suggests they ask it directly. Finally, he introduces himself as Wolfgang, the Grape, and claims that if the entity is truly the descendant of the Barbarians, it will remember his name. Suddenly, an aura of energy manifests around Kim Jin-woo, who screams, not understanding what's happening. Soon, the energy transforms into the spectral figure of a giant barbarian hovering over him. Surprised, Yeren wonders if this is a constellation's descent. The constellation then addresses Wolfgang, calling him the hero of the barbarians. Wolfgang then asks if it's angry, but the entity explains it was just the ignorance of a child who failed to recognize him. With that, the constellation asks for forgiveness on his behalf, saying the young man had no way of knowing. Wolfgang makes an exception, but points out that the young man is abusing his power and that appropriate action is necessary. The entity then agrees, stating it was already planning to do just that. Just like that, Jinwoo's body is thrown backward into the air by an invisible force. As Jinwoo falls unconscious to the ground, Wolfgang turns and walks toward the wall. A message then informs them that the constellation has terminated its provisional contract with Kim Jinwoo. Then, another notification announces that all contracts with the Kim family have also been terminated. In the middle of the crowd, Yeren wonders what the hell is going on, and just how powerful he is for a constellation to act that way. With that, the barbarian takes another step forward. Finally, he looks at the energy of the wall and asks if the constellation really was Leonidas. With a smile, Wolfgang warns that he has matters to attend to and will need to use a bit of his power. He then asks if the constellation can handle it. In response, the spear on the pedestal begins to vibrate with an even more intense energy. Next, a status message reports that the constellation Leonidas is deeply moved by the hero's presence and ignites the will of Sparta. Looking at the wall, Wolfgang thanks it and says he likes the entity's spirit. He then states that since the other one released its pressure, he supposes he should release his own as well. With that, a massive wave of energy explodes from his body, pushing the crowd back. The examiners shield themselves and shout, questioning what that is and how an aura can be so overwhelming. Soon, everyone in the area is forced back by the immense pressure spreading through the arena. Yeren then realizes this is no ordinary exam. It feels less less like Wolfgang is being tested and more like he is testing Leonidas itself. With his aura intensifying, the barbarian continues to test the constellation's strength. His energy then begins to press down on the spear on the pedestal with crushing force. Wolfgang asks if there's any point in resisting and tells the constellation to surrender, as he has no intention of losing. He then releases another powerful wave of energy from his body. Yeren then thinks that the scale of this aura is on a completely different level, and at this rate, even she can barely withstand it. Amid the pressure, Yeren thinks that if something isn't done, they'll be in serious danger, and she pleads for help. Suddenly, she realizes the aura vanished in an instant. Amid the confused crowd, Yeren asks what's wrong with everyone and if something happened. Right after, Wolfgang touches her shoulder to get her attention. He then tells them it's time to go, as there's no reason to stay any longer. As he walks away, Yeren questions him about the exam, calling him Lord Wolfgang. One of the examiners then shouts, "Sir!" and asks why he's leaving the student behind. He then notices in shock that the sacred relic of Leonidas is completely shattered. Confused, he looks at the destroyed wall and wonders what the hell happened. Facing the ruins of the arena, the examiner questions what they should do now. As they watch the news, Wolfgang comments that the sacred relic fought decently, but it was no match for him. Soon, the electronic board calls customer number 116 to the counter. Seeing Yeren head the wrong way, Wolfgang tells her to stop and come over to him. At the counter, the clerk asks if his name is Mr. Wolfgang, and the woman confirms it. The man then informs them that to receive the license, they need to pay 100 million won for the damages, and the debt will fall on Yeren if he can't pay. At this, the woman jumps to her feet and shouts, questioning the 100 million figure. The clerk then says they should consider themselves lucky, as the fine is only for the wall, since there were no regulations for relics considered indestructible. Outside, Yeren hands him the license and explains that after the subsidy, he now has a debt of 90 million won to pay. He then asks if 100 million is a huge amount, and Yeren confirms, desperately asking if she'll have to pay the entire debt. The barbarian asks if hunters don't make a fortune, and she replies that yes, but only the high-ranking combat ones do. Yeren then explains that, as an archaeologist hunter, she survives on sponsorships, and for an F-rank hunter to make 100 million, he then deduces that an F-rank only hunts weaklings with low rewards, but claims he can crush hundreds of them with a single fist. Then, he stands up and asks where the dungeon is, ordering her to take him there immediately. On the way, the woman says that to operate as a hunter, he needs an agency, and Wolfgang compares the system to the guilds of his era. She then explains that agencies collect the loot and secure permits, and the barbarian concludes they're just middlemen who take a cut of the earnings. As they walk through the agency district, Yeren explains that although they charge a commission, they handle all legal disputes, which isn't a bad deal. At one agency, however, they are told they don't accept foreigners and are sorry for the inconvenience. At another, they deny the contract, claiming Wolfgang didn't graduate from the academy. Soon, they are rejected again, as the agency prioritizes credit ratings, and Lord Wolfgang has none. Wolfgang then complains that people in this era talk too much, and Yeren explains that since they risk their lives, they need someone trustworthy. Suddenly, the woman stops and looks back, noticing something. The barbarian then faces her and asks why people are looking at him that way. She replies that in Korea, looking like a foreigner is a problem, and even if he shaved his beard, the animal skins he wears wouldn't help. At this, Wolfgang declares that a beard is a barbarian's pride, and that the pelt belongs to the Fenrir clan, so he will never get rid of them. Yeren then asks what good his pride is now, and suggests they change his look so he can get work as a hunter. Unexpectedly, a man approaches them and says, "Excuse me," which startles Wolfgang. With a smile, the man asks the two if they weren't looking for a hunter agency. He then introduces the Mu agency as one of the largest and most recognized, striving to build a utopia. Sitting at the table, Yeren thinks to herself that they are famous, yes, but for extorting hunters. The man then reveals he watched them get rejected, and that, fortunately, his agency is running a promotion that has drastically reduced contract requirements. As Yeren sighs, she thinks the promotion is probably because they act like thugs, and no decent hunter wants to join them. The agent then proposes a 3-year contract with an unfavorable profit split, and an advance payment of 20 million won. Horrified, Yeren thinks that this is basically a slave contract, and he shouldn't sign it under any circumstances. Wolfgang then cuts her off and demands a 100 million won advance to sign, while Yeren yells at him not to do it. He then asks her if she doesn't need the money, and the woman replies that's a separate issue. With a smile, the agent agrees to the 100 million won advance. In return, however, he imposes a 10-year contract with an even worse profit split. Later, Yeren scolds him for signing a contract full of toxic clauses and asks if they didn't have contracts in his time. He then replies that, Of course, he knows the weight of a contract, as many met terrible fates because of bad divine pacts. Hearing that, the woman puts her hand to her head, frustrated by his stubbornness. Wolfgang then explains that he always supports those who help him, and has always lived by that code. He then reveals that the demon Devil House slaughtered his family and his tribe, and that he just needs to find that beast. He then says that for his revenge, he made a contract with an archangel, and if he kills Devil House, he can bring everyone back. At this, Yeren apologizes and admits she didn't realize he carried such a heavy burden, but that she worries because he's the first person from the past she's ever met. With renewed spirit, she declares that just as battle is his destiny, helping him adapt to this world is hers. An agent then interrupts them to inform them that the accommodation is ready, and Wolfgang agrees to go. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a text message shows the news of the relic's destruction. Lying in bed, Yeren exchanges messages with friends and confirms that the figure in the news is the statue from the dungeon she had shown them. With this, she reflects that the event is a historic achievement, despite almost leaving her with a huge debt. In the conversation, she then refuses a friend's suggestion to hand Wolfgang over to him, questioning why she would do something so crazy. Back on the street, the agent finalizes the arrangements for their departure. With that, Wolfgang and Yeren follow the man down the sidewalk. Yeren then sighs and thinks that he'll be fine, but that she should have bought him a soda. Next, the agent takes him to his room, and Wolfgang immediately asks when he can enter the dungeons. The man explains that he can go up to 5 times a week, with 2 of them being mandatory. Wolfgang asks if he can go all 5 times, and the agent confirms that he can. He is then informed that the schedules will be sent to his phone, and that the meeting point is an empty lot in front of the building. The agent then says goodbye, wishing him a good rest and saying he'll see him tomorrow. Looking at the small room, Wolfgang comments that the size of the place reminds him of an inn in the dwarves' cave. He then reflects that maybe the room is better than the inn, and decides that either way he needs to find the latrine. Next, the barbarian says he first needs to find a torch. Then, he remembers the cell phone, the square device that emits light. He then picks up the device and wonders how to use it, noticing it's smaller than the one Yeren used. With that, he observes the unknown object and comments that this era is full of things he doesn't understand. Finally, he looks at his reflection in the window and concludes that it will take time to adapt and it won't be easy. A new day begins under a sunny and clear sky. An older man approaches and asks if everyone there is heading to the dungeon. Soon, someone in the crowd asks, "What's with the giant in the ridiculous outfit?" The man then turns to Wolfgang and asks if he's the new guy. As soon as Wolfgang confirms he's the rookie, the man asks if he plans on going in dressed like that. At this, Wolfgang glares back and asks how he dares to look at him that way. He then remembers Yeren's condition. She let him go on the promise that he would never attack a human. In his memory, he recalls asking why he should make such a promise. The woman had explained that this was a different era, and that humanity resisted demons mainly through the power of hunters. She had then added that something equally important was their intelligence network, far more advanced than in any other era. Furthermore, she had pointed out that modern humanity had an extreme aversion to infighting. Yeren had reminded him that he needed to find a specific demon. In the memory, the woman watched him intently as she spoke. Finally, she warned him that if he attacked people and made enemies, finding the demon would become even more difficult. Back in the present, Wolfgang maintains his firm gaze. Confused, the man asks what he means by glaring. He then warns him they're going to a dungeon, not a movie set, and tells him to change into a gas-proof suit. The man then points to the sword, calling it a piece of junk, and Wolfgang replies that it's his weapon. At this, the supervisor says they won't need weapons today and tells him to take a shower while he changes. Wolfgang then clenches his fists and agrees to do as asked. Immediately after, the people around him shout, asking what he's doing, calling him a psycho and a pervert. Not understanding, he asks if he wasn't supposed to wash up and change clothes, asking to be taken to a stream, but the man calls him an idiot. Next, a truck drives down a dirt road toward a remote facility. In the vehicle, a young man yawns, complaining about the distance. The supervisor tells him to stop grumbling and be thankful he's in a B-rank dungeon. The young man retorts that it's only B-rank in name, since in practice they just collect slime carcasses. He then explains that he needs money for the promotion exam fee, and the supervisor asks if he even has the skill for it. The man then asks where else he could earn money like this, since the task of collecting carcasses isn't even dangerous. The young man complains that the pay rate keeps dropping, but the supervisor yells at him to shut up and quit if he's not satisfied. Finally, the truck reaches its destination, with Wolfgang sitting in the truck bed, arms crossed. A man in a suit then approaches and thanks the supervisor for the long trip. The supervisor asks what brings assistant manager Kim Junhan here, and the young man replies that it's the new hunter's first mission. The manager then asks how the rookie is doing, and the supervisor replies that they'll have to see, but there's a more pressing matter. Upon seeing Wolfgang, the agency agent greets him with surprise and asks why he's dressed that way. He then explains that they told him to take off his clothes and wear this this weird thing, but that he has no trouble moving. The agent scolds him, saying he should be wearing a gas-proof suit in this slime dungeon. Desperate, Yunhan defends himself, explaining that Wolfgang is so big that none of the suits fit him. The supervisor then says it's fine as long as he wears a gas mask, since they only need to worry about the fragments. With that, he tells them to do the briefing while they clear the first floor, and Junhan tries to understand the reason for the rush. The supervisor then asks the manager if a gas mask alone will be enough for the first floor. The man replies that it will, since the area only has remains, but from the second floor on there are live slimes. At this, Junhan turns to Wolfgang and instructs him to start on the first floor while he finds a suit as quickly as possible, warning him not to go up. In front of the entrance, the manager explains that the job is simple. Collect the slime remains inside the dungeon. Once inside, he reminds them to be careful of the toxic gas on the first floor, and one of the hunters says they already know, as it's not their first time. Wolfgang then says he has a question and asks if there are many slime remains inside. Next, he looks at the collection jars and asks how many of them they have available. The young hunter asks if he's okay, warning that the special glass jars are quite heavy. He then explains that the empty container weighs almost 10 kilos, and Wolfgang replies that it's not a problem. With both of them wearing masks, the young man asks if he's ever dealt with slimes, and the barbarian says he knows of them, but has never bothered to fight them. The hunter tells him to pay attention, since F-rank hunters encounter them every day, and soon spots a slime remnant on the ground. He then shows the slime and explains that even when dead, they retain their toxicity and should never be touched with bare hands. Wolfgang then picks it up and comments that the toxicity is potent, while the young man yells, asking if he's gone mad. The young man warns him not to touch it, and asks to see his hand, questioning if his skin shouldn't be melting. He then grabs the barbarian's hand and inspects it up close. Surprised, the young man wonders why his hand is perfectly fine. He then tells him to be careful, as it's dangerous, but sees him touch some butterflies on the wall, fearing his fingers might melt. Wolfgang reassures him, saying his fingers won't melt from something so insignificant, and the young man wonders what he is. With that, the barbarian removes his mask, stating that it's just a useless nuisance. The hunter asks if he's okay breathing in there, and Wolfgang replies there's no problem and urges him to get moving. In a flashback, the young hunter is reminded of his conversation about needing money for the promotion exam. Back in the present, he's surprised by Wolfgang's sharp hearing and tells him to stop chattering and keep walking. In the deepest part of the first floor, the young hunter complains they haven't filled a single jar yet, and wonders if the scarcity of slimes is normal. He then laments that normally they would have filled 2 jars by now, and at this rate they might end up losing money. Wolfgang then suggests they go down to the next floor, but the young man refuses, saying it's too dangerous for just 2 F-rank hunters. At this, the barbarian offers to go down and fill the jars himself, but the young man tells him not to risk it, and that he'll just accept the loss. He continues, explaining that it's dangerous, and that while he has a suit, Wolfgang doesn't. But the warrior replies that it doesn't matter. The young man then insists, asking if he's sure it's okay, and the barbarian confirms that it is. With that, the young man says that, besides that, something is worrying him, and Wolfgang asks what it is. He then mentions the sound coming from below, and the barbarian reveals that he senses a demonic energy. At the Hunter Association, Yeren finds it strange when she hears the number she dialed is out of service. She then wonders what's going on, since she can't call the number they said they gave him. Nearby, Agent Junhan worries about the waiting doctor, while mentioning that the association doesn't have any larger suits. On the phone, he apologizes and suggests the person clean only the first floor, and Yeren recognizes him. Junhan then hangs up and grumbles that he has to go back to the slime dungeon and that he really needs to buy a car. Suddenly, Yeren surprises him from behind and asks if Wolfgang is in that slime dungeon right now. Soon she confronts a manager about Wolfgang's phone being out of service and demands to be taken to the dungeon. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the dungeon's second sublevel, a live glowing slime drips from the ceiling. Seeing the creature, the young hunter yells for Wolfgang to be careful, as live slimes have a higher toxicity. Without hesitation, Wolfgang simply grabs the live slime with his bare hand. He then puts it in the jar and comments that the second sublevel definitely fills the container faster. With the jar full, the young man celebrates that this should be enough money for the promotion exam. He then smiles and suggests they leave to get paid, since they filled everything they brought. A short time later, the place is empty and the trapdoor to the next level is open. The young hunter then looks down and wonders if Wolfgang went down to the third sublevel. The young hunter thinks that they aren't allowed on level 3, as it's a restricted area managed by the Xiangshan Guild. A sign then states that entry is strictly forbidden, and he reflects that challenging a guild alone is suicide. Desperate, he enters a tunnel and calls out for the man, warning that he can't go in there. Soon he finds the Slime King trapped in a barrier and deduces that all the slimes from the upper floors were created there. Wolfgang then points to a mana injector, explaining that the barrier is maintained by that device. Next, they observe that slimes are constantly coming out through a small pipe. The young man realizes that the creatures that emerge crawl towards the light on the upper floors. From this, he concludes they were collecting manufactured slimes and that the Shongshin Guild has been profiting from it. Suddenly, Wolfgang notices the airflow has changed. A strange rain begins to fall, and the young hunter asks what it is. The barbarian then points up and says it's coming from there. They then see trash falling from a pipe at the top of the barrier, and the young man is shocked by the discovery. Seeing the scene, Wolfgang asks if they're feeding the creature. Soon, the young man confirms that the slime is eating trash sent from the surface. With that, a disgusting green liquid slowly trickles down the feeding pipe. Wolfgang then realizes, outraged, that they were making money by feeding the creature trash. Suddenly, a status screen informs him that a new language has been detected and the language comprehension skill has been activated. The young hunter asks if he heard something again, but the barbarian replies that it's more than that. Soon, the young man reacts with surprise upon noticing the change in the environment. He then yells for the man to look, as the remaining slimes are coming back. Then, one of the slimes sticks to Wolfgang, and another slime sticks to him. With that, all the surrounding slimes begin to stick to Wolfgang simultaneously. Soon, they merge and completely envelop the barbarian's body. Desperate, the young hunter shouts for the man, fearing the worst. Inside the slime mass, Wolfgang remains motionless, his eyes closed. Suddenly, a bright green light appears, and he hears a voice asking to be killed. With his gaze fixed on the light, Wolfgang tells the entity that it can speak. The voice then repeatedly begs for him to kill it. Finally, Wolfgang stands in a pool of green liquid, observing the mysterious bright light. Wolfgang then offers to grant the creature's wish if it answers where the demon devil house is. The entity of light replies that it doesn't know, and the barbarian just says he understands. Then, the goo that covered him begins to slowly dissolve. The slime runs down his entire body as he remains motionless. The other hunters approach and ask if he's all right, noticing his clothes have completely melted away. With a serious look, he tells them to stop and states that the creature is begging for him to kill it. The young hunter asks if the Slime King really wants to die, and Wolfgang confirms that is its wish. The young man warns him that they can't kill it, but Wolfgang points to the mana injector and asks if the creature will die if he breaks it. Stammering, the hunter confirms that it will, but that they can't just break the device, while the barbarian observes that it looks fragile. Desperate, the young man forbids him from breaking the guild's injector and asks them to just go back. But Wolfgang simply questions him. As the young man agrees, he suddenly looks at his own hand and wonders what's happening. With his arms outstretched, the young hunter shouts for the man to wait. He reminds him this area is guild-controlled and asks how he'll face the consequences. With a firm gaze, Wolfgang simply tells him to get out of the way. He has a promise to keep. As the young man tries to argue, the barbarian says it's too late, as the injector is already breaking. The young man then screams, realizing the Slime King's barrier is shattering. He turns to the creatures, asking what's wrong with the slimes. Wolfgang shoves him away, telling him to leave and that he'll handle everything, but the young man refuses to leave him behind. The barbarian insists, warning him the place is about to collapse. The young man begs him to make it out alive. Wolfgang simply states that his concern is unnecessary. The young man then shouts, he'll go on ahead, pleading for him to make it out alive no matter what happens. Watching him run off, Wolfgang turns and tells the creature that now it's its turn. Hands on his hips, he watches the barrier completely shatter. Then, an explosion of green energy engulfs the area. Outside, the sun begins to set over the remote facility. Soon, the manager spots Yeren and Junhwan arriving and greets them. Junhwan asks about the hunters, and the man replies he isn't sure since they haven't come out yet. Looking at the facility, Junhwan questions if they're still inside. Suddenly, a strong tremor begins. He yells in fright, asking what that was. Inside the van, Yeren is also startled by the shaking and wonders what's happening. While the men shield themselves from what they believe is an earthquake, she wonders if there's another problem. Soon, Yeren notices the tremor has stopped, and Junhwan agrees with a sigh of relief. The manager then says he needs to report to headquarters and check the dungeon, as he's worried about the hunters inside. With that, Junhwan asks Yeren what she'll do, and she replies that she'll go with him if there's an extra gas mask. Inside the dungeon, the Slime King asks if Wolfgang wasn't going to kill it, but the barbarian says it should see the outside world first. The creature understands. As the place begins to crumble, it asks him to take it to the outside world. With that, the goo latches onto Wolfgang's body, who comments on the strange sensation. Then Wolfgang pulls it toward the exit. The mass of goo molds itself around his body as he moves forward. Outside, the ground begins to shake again as Yeren holds a a gas mask. On the lower floors, the young hunter feels the tremor and wonders what the shaking is. A moment later, the tunnel collapses, and he screams that the Slime King has been freed. The young hunter runs desperately through the crumbling dungeon corridor. In a panic, he screams that the creature is catching up and is going to get him. He then curses in frustration, realizing the monster is right behind him. Suddenly, a figure speeds past him. Soon, Wolfgang is rushing down the corridor, covered in the slime's goo. Spotting the exit, the young man shouts in relief that he's close. Believing he's safe, he thinks he's finally escaped. He then turns and questions the Sir's presence beside him. Suddenly, Wolfgang grabs him by the hood, and the young man wonders if he's being used as bait. With that, the barbarian hurls him away as he's engulfed by slime tentacles. The young hunter is thrown through the air toward the dungeon exit. He lands hard on the platform outside. Inside the dungeon, Wolfgang faces the creature with a determined look. Finally, he pulls the slime out of the dungeon. A giant wave of slime surges out, taking over the platform. Outside, the guild members watch the creature approach. In her car, Yeren also sees the enormous mass of goo advancing. Soon, the Slime King emerges from the dungeon in all its glory. The young hunter calls out to the Sir, asking why he brought the Slime King out instead of killing it. Wolfgang explains he made a deal with the creature, as a captive deserves to see the sunlight at least once before dying. Surprised, the young man just stares at him, speechless. The barbarian then hands him a glowing object and tells him to take it. He explains that it's the Slime King's core, and if it's broken, the creature will die. He then reveals that a part of the Slime King's power will be transferred to whoever breaks it. Shocked, the young man asks why he's giving it to him. Wolfgang replies that it's power he doesn't need, and that a barbarian always repays those who help him. The young man just watches him in silence, not knowing what to say. With that, the Slime King marvels at the beauty of the outside world and thanks the Sir. Suddenly, Wolfgang spots Yeren and calls out to her, asking if she came to welcome them. Wolfgang then runs toward Yeren, passing the guild guards. One of the agents, on the phone, requests at least 50 transport trucks to be sent. Then, Yeren asks if she can take Wolfgang with her, and the man agrees, saying the settlement will take a few hours. With that, the barbarian rushes her into the car, and she asks why he's in such a hurry. The woman then says he's caused a huge mess, but Wolfgang denies it, claiming he did nothing. Yeren tells the driver to step on it, while the barbarian insists he only kept his promise. She then says they need to hurry, as someone has been eagerly waiting for him all day. As the car drives away, Wolfgang wonders if she's talking about him. Finally, his eyes widen as he wonders if they've finally found the demon devil house. At night, a car with its headlights on approaches a remote facility near the mountains. A man then offers assistant manager Kim Jun-hwan a ride, but he explains he needs to stay behind to confirm a late payment. The driver agrees the delay was expected due to the trucks and says goodbye, telling him he'll go on ahead. Far away, an older man on the phone corrects someone, stating the amount wasn't 150 kilos but 150 tons. In an office, a woman furiously questions how a harvest of 150 tons of slime could possibly make any sense. Soon, team leader Kang Mae-eon asks a man named Kang Junmo if he would simply pay 1.4 billion won for something so absurd. She continues, outraged that the fee is for a single day's work for an F-rank hunter, and demands that Kang Junmo start using his head. On the other end of the line, the leader orders him to stop taking advantage of being her brother and go check the dungeon immediately. At this, Kang Junmo sits next to a colleague and complains about his sister, while the other man asks what went wrong. He then explains he was ordered to inspect the dungeon first and call her back. With no other choice, he gets up to follow the order and tells everyone present they'll have to wait a little longer. Meanwhile, in another room, a shower starts spraying water forcefully. In the bathroom, Wolfgang watches the water in his hand, marveling at the fact that it comes from inside a house. From inside the room, he asks Kang Yeren how the water flows, wondering if they happen to collect rainwater from the roof. Outside, Kang Yeren tells him to stop admiring it and hurry up, as someone has been waiting all day to see him. From inside the shower, Wolfgang agrees to her request and gets ready to come out. Next, a set of clean clothes is laid out for him. As soon as he's out, Wolfgang asks if the person waiting is important to Kang Yeren. She confirms it's the leader of the archaeologist hunters. With that, she mentions that it's too late today, but tomorrow they'll need to buy him proper clothes and shoes. Right at the door, Wolfgang asks if there's anything to eat, but Kang Yeren warns him that introductions come first. She then apologizes to the doctor for the delay and announces that she has finally brought Wolfgang. Kang Yeren then formally introduces him as Dr. Choi Myung-jun and asks Wolfgang to greet him. As the doctor greets him, she explains that he is an expert in ancient artifacts and Wolfgang introduces himself as a member of the Wolf tribe. Wolfgang then asks if he is the leader of this so-called archaeology tribe and where it has set down its roots. The doctor then patiently clarifies that archaeology isn't a tribe, but the study of history and ancient artifacts. As soon as the introduction is over, Wolfgang's stomach rumbles and he declares it's now time for them to eat. Soon, several boxes of fried chicken are placed on the table for their meal. The doctor tells him to eat at his own pace and that he'll order more if it's not enough, while Kang Yirin offers him a soda. After taking a drink, Wolfgang turns to the doctor and asks directly what he wanted to discuss. The man explains he'd like to ask a few questions, and Wolfgang encourages him to ask anything, promising to answer as best he can. The doctor asks how Wolfgang can speak such perfect Korean, since he supposedly came from the past, and the language should be completely different. At this, Wolfgang reveals he received the blessing of the angels, which granted him the ability to speak and understand any language. Confused, Dr. Choi asks what angels are and if that might be the name of a constellation. Wolfgang then asks what a constellation is, and Kang Yirin reminds him that he saw them during his hunter exam. She then gives the constellations of Leonidas as an example. Right after, she also mentions the descendant of the Barbarian's constellation. Hearing the examples, Wolfgang understands and comments that this is what they call those weak beings. He explains that angels are on a completely different level, possessing the strength to face demons, and that they once came to his tribe with a request. A moment later, Dr. Choi stands up and prepares to summarize the entire story he has just heard. He begins by stating that in Wolfgang's era, angels and demons were at war, and the barbarian tribes joined the fight at the angels' request. He then recounts that, tragically, the barbarians were wiped out by the demons. Continuing, he narrates that Wolfgang, as the sole survivor, sought revenge and marched alone to the demonic fortress. Wolfgang then adds that after defeating everyone, he finally faced his nemesis, Devil House, but fell victim to his curse. Kang Yirin comforts him, assuring him it's all right and that they will find him. At this, Wolfgang remains silent with a serious expression. Wolfgang then closes his eyes for a moment, processing the harsh memory. Dr. Choi then apologizes for bringing up a painful subject, but Wolfgang states it's a memory that must never be forgotten. The doctor then hesitates for a moment and asks if he can ask him one more favor. Wolfgang then looks at him seriously and instructs him to say what he wants. The man explains that since Wolfgang was discovered as an artifact, he needs to verify his authenticity. With a slight smile, Wolfgang questions if he's really considered an artifact. Not knowing how to react, Dr. Choi simply waits by the window. He then presents a statue, explaining it's a creation of his constellation, the martial artist of the Buddha, a monk from the Goryeo dynasty. He then asks for permission to summon the constellation's manifestation to verify the warrior's identity. Without answering, Wolfgang just watches him with a thoughtful expression. Kang Yirin intervenes and asks him to accept, as all her research to find him depends on this verification. Still silent, he just looks at Kang Yirin, pondering the request. She insists, reminding him that the doctor will also help find Devil House, and with that, he finally agrees to the procedure. As soon as permission is granted, the Buddha statue begins to emit a strong light. Then, the martial artist constellation manifests, recognizing the hero of the barbarians and asking who it was that put an end to the turbulent times. The doctor, confused, repeats the constellation's question about who ended the turbulent times. The constellation then pays its respects to the hero of the barbarians for having put an end to the holy demonic war. Wolfgang then states there's no need for such respect. As for him, it was only a half victory. Suddenly, the constellation's manifestation begins to flicker as the doctor struggles to maintain it. With that, the summons dissipates completely, leaving the doctor exhausted. He then apologizes, explaining he ran out of mana to continue. Even so, he confirms with relief that Wolfgang is genuine and thanks him for his time. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a person in a protective suit descends in an elevator toward the bottom of the dungeon. Upon arriving, he finds a containment tube completely shattered and questions what the hell happened there. Not understanding, he wonders how the situation could have gotten to this point. On the other end of the line, Kang Maeon reacts with surprise, asking why the Slime King has disappeared. The guild leader gets angry hearing that the containment tubes are empty and destroyed, with no sign of slimes on the third floor. She then accuses him of joking, since not even she, an A-rank hunter, could destroy that tube. On the other side, he defends himself, stating he confirmed the two people who entered in the morning were F-rank, with one of them being a complete rookie. As soon as he reveals the rookie got his license just the day before, she asks incredulously if he's really sure about that information. She then deduces that the rookie might be the key to everything and orders them to gather as much information on him as possible. She then reveals her plan to sue the Mu agency for damages, find out the rookie's identity, and focus on securing the evidence. When her brother asks about the 1.4 billion won payment, she furiously yells at him not to pay a single cent and to send the employee away. The next day, the scene is set in a shopping mall with large sale signs. In a shoe store, Wolfgang calls Kang Yerin over to ask her a question. He then shows her a card and asks why he can't contact anyone with it. Kang Yerin realizes his mistake and asks if he thought the card was a phone. He confirms this and mentions finding a bigger one, a large card, but left it behind. She then explains that he probably mistook a credit card for a cell phone. Annoyed, Wolfgang defends himself, saying there was no way he could have known, since no one taught him. Kang Yerin just smiles and promises to explain everything once they're done shopping. Soon, an employee approaches and apologizes for the delay in service. He then presents the store's largest shoes, and another customer is shocked to hear the size is 340. Far away, someone holds a photo of Wolfgang in his old barbarian appearance. Then, a mysterious man in glasses watches Kang Yerin from a distance. Back in the store, she looks at some clothes and comments that while the size seems right, she's not sure how he's supposed to wear them. As Wolfgang comes out of the fitting room, she is surprised by his appearance, thinking he looks like an older man. While adjusting his clothes, Kang Yerin suggests taking off his hat and comments that he now looks like a modern professional fighter. She then asks him to dress like that from now on. Although reluctant, Wolfgang agrees to try while she goes to the restroom. Meanwhile, two men watch from afar, and one suggests it's best to strike first. Near the entrance, Wolfgang wonders why there are two doors leading to the same place. Suddenly, a system message announces that the constellation Trainer of the Black Bison has activated a skill through its contractor. As the skill activates, the masked man loses his balance. In a coordinated attack, he flies overhead while his partner prepares to strike from the front. Immediately after, another constellation activates the heavy strike skill through the man in sunglasses. With a swift move, a hand appears to intercept the blow. However, Wolfgang easily grabs his head, while the first attacker is already down in the background. He then asks if they were the ones following him all day, and questions who sent them. The attacker confirms his identity and threatens him, saying he'd better come with them quietly. In response, Wolfgang simply crushes the glasses on the man's face. Surprised by the strength of a supposed F rank, the man shouts for his partner, Yoon Ho-sung, to help. Ignoring his desperation, Wolfgang repeats the question, asking if the Seongshin Guild sent him. From a distance, Kang Yerin reflects on how much trouble Wolfgang is and hopes he adapts to this new era soon. Worried, Kang Yerin realizes he probably doesn't know how to use a public restroom, and she can't go in to help him. With that, Wolfgang orders the attacker to go back and warn his tribal chief that if this happens again, his tribe will be wiped from the face of the earth. The attacker then helps his partner up, and they both flee the scene. As Kang Yerin comes out of the restroom, she finds Wolfgang standing over the shattered sunglasses. She then suggests they first get something to eat and then head to their place, where she'll teach him how to use a cell phone and credit cards. As they walk, Wolfgang asks what they're going to eat, and she tells him he can pick whatever he wants, as Dr. Choi is paying. Elsewhere, a notification reveals that the Seongshin Guild has demanded 6 billion won in damages, citing the dungeon's destruction and the elimination of the Slime King. In a meeting, an employee comments that although the Slime King's barrier was destroyed, it makes no sense to blame them, since they sent F-rank hunters. His superior explains that Seongshin claims the recovered body was the Slime King's, so instead of paying, they are now demanding 6 billion. With that, the man asks Jun Hwan directly if he is absolutely sure that yesterday's hunters were F-rank, and he confirms he checked their licenses. He reinforces his position, saying he's been in the industry for a long time, and was once a hunter himself, so he knows how things work. Even so, his superior invites him to watch the video the Seongshin Guild sent as proof of their claims. The video then shows the exact scene where Wolfgang easily overpowers the two attackers in the hallway. The superior identifies the hooded hunter as Yoon Ho-sung, an E rank with skills that rival a D ranks. He then points out that the other attacker was Jang Min-jae, a D rank, and highlights that both were completely overpowered, even with a surprise attack. With that, the superior informs him that the Seongshin Guild has filed a formal protest and wants to know who is behind the Mu agency and why they lied about the hunters. Indignant, Jun Hwan stands up to confront them, but his boss tells him to calm down. The manager then states that since the partnership with Seongshin is already ruined, they might as well sue them to demand the 1.4 billion won payment. So, Jun Hwan asks him to secure the payment and says goodbye, mentioning he needs to find the new hunter for the contract. Immediately after, he gets into a taxi and asks the driver to take him to Cheongdam. Inside the car, he complains about the Seongshin Guild's dirty tricks to avoid payment and laments that he'll never be able to buy a car this way. Suddenly, while watching the video again, he notices something important in the footage. He then wonders how a D-rank hunter, using a constellation's power, couldn't even budge Wolfgang, who shouldn't even have a contract. With this in mind, he starts to wonder if he should test the new hunter. He then decides he will find out if Wolfgang is a big shot or just another nobody. A few days later, Wolfgang crosses a busy city street, carrying his giant sword on his back. Stopping on the sidewalk, he wonders if the king of this land oppresses his people, forcing them to obey the colors of a light. Then, he remembers Kang Yaren's instructions about the traffic light and how he should cross the street. On the other side, Kang Yaren waves and calls out to him, and he greets her back. As they walk, she asks if he brought everything. He confirms that the foreman's directions were good. Once they arrive at the office, she announces their arrival to Dr. Choi. The doctor apologizes for making them come all the way there and invites them into the storage room. Inside, he marvels at the sword, and Wolfgang asks Yaren why the man is acting that way. She then explains that he's an archaeologist, and it would be strange if he wasn't excited to see a 1,000-year-old relic with its original owner. With that, Wolfgang hands over his ancient garments and warns him to handle the wolf pelt with care. It once belonged to Fenrir. Soon, Dr. Choi leads them further into the storage room. He then calls for Choi Jung-yun and Kang Ji-ho to meet Wolfgang, the person he had told them about. Upon seeing him, Kang Ji-ho comments that while he already looked big as a statue, in person he's absolutely gigantic. She then introduces herself as an A-rank hunter archaeologist and extends her hand to greet him. Wolfgang shakes her hand and formally introduces himself. Next, Kang Ji-ho introduces her research assistant, Choi Jung-yun. Suddenly, Kang Yaren appears from behind Wolfgang, and Ji-ho greets her. At this, Jung-yun approaches to touch the sword and excitedly asks if it also awakened with him. Wolfgang then explains that this weapon was passed down through generations of wolf tribe chiefs. Then, the sound of clapping echoes through the room. Once she has their attention, Kang Ji-ho reveals they have a problematic relic of unknown origin and invites him to see it. Confused by the commotion, Wolfgang asks Yaren if archaeologists are always this frantic. She asks him to understand, as they are just fascinated. Soon, Kang Ji-ho unveils the relic, which was found in the same cave where he was a statue. She then asks if he recognizes it, explaining that this particular item resists all measurements. Touching the glass, Wolfgang begins to tell the story of Jonas, son of Louis, who lived at the entrance to his village. He continues, revealing that Jonas was a brave warrior who competed with him for the position of chief and was also his dearest friend. With that, Wolfgang recalls that when the Holy Demonic War began, his friend fought against the demons and had a glorious death. He then reveals that the weapon belonged to Jonas, and after his death, it became his as well. Finally, he tells them he carried his friend's weapon onto the battlefield, and, with it, slaughtered tens of thousands of demons. As she listens to the story, Kang Yaren remains silent with a moved expression. With that, Wolfgang declares he needs to find the demon who killed Jonas. Kang Yaren then takes his hand and advises him not to carry the entire burden alone. He then turns to look at her. She then reminds him that he has allies now, and that they should face this together. When she promises to do her best to help, he thanks her for her trust. As Kang Ji-ho apologizes, Wolfgang tells her not to worry, because thanks to her, he found Jonas's weapon. He then asks if it helped with the research, and she confirms it helped immensely, as they now know the item is linked to him. Suddenly, something catches his attention, causing him to interrupt her. In his hand, a piece of energy materializes, and he recognizes it. Soon, the artifact in his hand begins to pulse with strong energy. Immediately, Kang Ji-ho yells for him to stop, warning that there's an anti-theft barrier in place. While Kang Yaren asks what he's doing, Wolfgang struggles against the barrier. With a single pull, he completely shatters the containment barrier. Right after, he senses a presence and declares that what he was looking for is there. The scene cuts to a memory of Wolfgang being hit by multiple projectiles. Next, the memory reveals Devil House atop a giant wolf, staring at the Barbarian with a smile. The demon then shows a cruel expression, revealing his horns and white hair under his hood. Back in the present, Wolfgang continues to strike the barrier with all his might. With the impact, a dark energy shatters in his hand. Then, he screams the name of the demon responsible for his curse, Devil House. At this, the researcher asks if the stain on the arrowhead is Wolfgang's blood. The researcher confirms it is, as he can feel the sacred power of the angel with whom Wolfgang has a contract. Then, Kang Ji-ho adds that the subtle magical power on the arrowhead belongs to Devil House. Kang Ji-ho scolds him for his recklessness, but Wolfgang apologizes, admitting he lost control of his emotions. Even so, she reassures him that it's okay, as they've made progress thanks to him. She then reveals she suspected the mace was a sacred relic, but never imagined the truth about the arrowhead. With that, she laments not realizing the magical power was blocking the analysis. They would have needed a demon hunter. She then explains that both use mana, and only a demon hunter can tell them apart, which is why even she didn't suspect anything. Wolfgang Wolfgang then clarifies that he doesn't know a method, but he learned to sense the demon's different energy naturally after countless battles. Annoyed, Kang Jiho complains that this is why they need a demon hunter and blames the association for ignoring her numerous requests. She then turns to the doctor and asks if she's wrong, but he just sighs. Suddenly, she seems to get an idea as she repeats the words, demon hunter. Not understanding her reaction, the doctor asks what happened. With that, Kang Jiho suggests that Wolfgang become a demon hunter, leaving him confused by the sudden proposal. She then reveals that, at the doctor's request, she researched a demon named Devil House in exchange for him coming to the lab. She then explains that, as an A-rank hunter, her access to data is broader, since archaeologists can only see already discovered entities. Kang Yerin adds that demon hunters, on the other hand, have access to almost all information about demons. She then suggests that Wolfgang would easily qualify for the position, since he can sense demons and is incredibly strong. Faced with the opportunity, Wolfgang asks what he needs to do to become one. Kang Jiho states that it's simple. He just has to pass the hunter promotion exam, which causes Yerin to react in despair. Confused, she questions their reaction, as Yerin slumps over the table. At this, Yerin explains that the promotion exam itself is the problem, and Wolfgang asks why there won't be one. The doctor then reveals that the spear of Leonidas, used in the exam, was damaged, and it will be difficult to proceed until they find a new sacred relic. Thus, Kang Jiho concludes that without the promotion exam, it will be difficult for him to become a demon hunter. After apologizing to Wolfgang, Kang Jiho reveals that there is, in fact, another way to get the license. At this, the unexpected news catches the attention of Wolfgang and Kang Yerin, who stare at her in surprise. Then, the assistant Choi Jung-yun explains that if the only goal is the license, there is another path besides the promotion exam. He then reveals that the alternative to get what they want is to enroll in the academy. The assistant explains that, although it's rare, specialized classes can obtain a license through certification from an accredited institution. Hearing this, Kang Yerin asks if the academy is only for teenagers, but Kang Jiho clarifies that there are students in their 20s as well. Then, out of curiosity, she asks Wolfgang how old he was before he was petrified. He replies that since his birth, the 4 seasons have passed 33 times. Hearing his answer, everyone is shocked by his age, and Yerin realizes she's actually older than him. Not understanding their reaction, Wolfgang asks what Nuna means, and Yerin explains it's a term used to refer to an older woman. He then accepts the custom of that land and turns to address Kang Jiho. Right after, he calls her Jiho Nuna, and she yells at him not to call her that with his scary face. Far away, one man instructs another to wait for the dungeon schedule, which will be sent by message. Walking down the hall, assistant manager Kim Jun-hwan thinks that his next task is to pick up the rookie hunter. He then stops for a moment and takes out his phone. The scene then shows the door to the room where Wolfgang is staying. In a brief memory, he recalls the incident in the slime dungeon. Immediately after, he re-watches the video where Wolfgang easily overpowers the 2 hunters. From this, he concludes he needs to assess the rookie's skills to decide whether he's worth keeping or discarding. He then decides that a simple exchange of blows would be enough to find out everything. Meanwhile, Kang Yerin explains that since the Mu agency has a partnership with the academy, they can get a contract suspension. She also mentions that Jiho offered to cover the contract cancellation fee with the agency. Next, Yerin suggests the best option would be to transfer him to Jiho's guild, as it would give them a better chance of finding Devil House. With that, she realizes the only remaining problem is the admission fee, which becomes the biggest obstacle. Then, Wolfgang comments that while it was the same in his time, in this era, it seems impossible to get by without wealth, and Yerin agrees. Suddenly, manager Kim Jun-hwan approaches and offers to pay the academy's admission fee. He then reveals he will do it on one condition. Wolfgang must do him a favor. As soon as he asks to be hit with full force, Wolfgang advises him to reconsider, as he has no desire to kill him. Even so, the manager insists and reveals himself to be a C-rank combat hunter, confident that a single punch from an F-rank wouldn't take him down. Unimpressed, Kang Yerin comments that he looks so weak she could probably beat him herself. The manager laughs at her skepticism and states that one shouldn't judge a person by appearances alone. He then reveals that although he is a C-rank, by using his constellation's abilities, he can easily match an A-rank. Hearing this, Kang Yerin doubts his claim, thinking he's bluffing, since an A-rank would be famous. Right after, she starts to wonder if there's a reason for him to keep a low profile, even with so much power. Kang Yerin deduces that the object in the manager's hand must be his constellation's sacred relic, but she can't identify it to know if he's bluffing. She then warns him to be careful, as the manager is holding a sacred relic. Even so, Wolfgang states that a barbarian never refuses a man's request and that, with a relic, he should survive one punch. With that, he admits he's curious to see how much power the manager can draw from that relic. Then, Wolfgang tells Kang Yeren to step back so she won't get caught in the shockwave, while she questions if he's really going to do it. He then prepares for the confrontation with a serious and determined look. Next, Wolfgang instructs him to summon his constellation, declaring that he is ready for combat. The manager agrees with a smile and gets ready to begin. Soon, a system message announces that the constellation, owner of the sacred royal seal, has answered contractor Kim Jun-hwan's call. With that, the relic in his hand begins to emanate a strong blue energy. Seeing the message, Kang Yeren is surprised by the word possession. She then realizes, shocked, that the constellation is directly possessing the contractor's body. Next, the manager's body is enveloped in an aura of energy. Soon, Kang Yeren notices that his appearance has completely changed, taking the form of the constellation. She then wonders about the identity of the constellation, the owner of the sacred royal seal. With that, the constellation reveals itself as Park Munsu, the secret royal inspector. Immediately after, he summons an army of spiritual guards who materialize around Wolfgang. The scene then widens, showing the entire army positioned for combat. Unfazed, Wolfgang questions if he should really fight all those men. The constellation then clarifies that he doesn't need to worry, as he only summoned them to draw out his sacred power. He then explains that his strength increases against corrupt opponents, but is harmless to those with integrity and innocence. Hearing the explanation, Wolfgang states he understands and prepares to attack. Without hesitation, he moves forward and delivers a direct punch to the constellation's face. With its face buried in his fist, the constellation tries in vain to ask him to wait. Then, Wolfgang holds him with an aura of light and asks if that's enough. With the impact, the possession breaks, and the manager is enveloped by an energy that proves his innocence. From a distance, Kang Yeren complains that she can't see anything because of the guards. She then tries to look over them to understand what's happening. Suddenly, the guards disappear, and she wonders why they vanished. In the distance, she sees Wolfgang standing over the fallen manager and wonders if it's already over. As soon as she asks if he's okay, Wolfgang confirms he wasn't hurt. He then shows more concern for the manager, and Yeren asks if he might be dead. Lying on the ground, the manager thinks this isn't how he imagined things would go. Wolfgang states that he's alive, though he doesn't look well, and Yeren asks if the admission fee is settled. Next, she reminds him not to forget the admission fee and arranges to meet him on Monday. She then shouts, reinforcing that he absolutely cannot forget their deal. As he gets up, the manager comments with relief that he doesn't sense any evil energy coming from him. He then concludes that, at that level, he's definitely not a disposable card, but he wonders how he was hit during the possession. In his thoughts, he concludes that it should have been completely impossible. With this, he wonders who Wolfgang really is, and if he could be a constellation or something even greater. Elsewhere, a muscular man named Kim Jinwoo prepares for intense training. In the background, a metal plate already shows the mark of a powerful previous punch. He then focuses energy into his fist, getting ready for the next strike. Then, he shouts with all his might as he channels the power. He unleashes a powerful punch that dents the metal plate even further. After the blow, he breathes heavily, exhausted from the effort he just made. The strength meter above him starts to flash, displaying the number 0. Then, the scoreboard shows a score of 21-27, and he celebrates getting stronger. A few days later, in the morning, the scene is set on the long entrance steps of the Seoul Academy. As they climb the stairs, Kang Yeren rushes Wolfgang, who replies that he's trying his best. From a distance, she warns him that excuse won't work if he's trying to get out of paying the tuition. With difficulty, he explains it's not about the money, but the after effects of the constellation's possession from last time. In the administration office, an employee explains that due to the relic incident, the exams were moved to the academy and the application deadline was extended. He then informs them that while an exam is usually required, since Wolfgang already has a license, they can process his admission immediately. With the recommendation letter in hand, the employee assigns him to Class F, explaining that he can move up in rank through internal exams. Relieved, Kang Yeren remarks that it's lucky he got into the academy precisely because of the relic he himself destroyed. She then takes the opportunity to ask if it's true that specializations like Demon Hunter can be certified directly at the academy. The employee confirms that Professor Kim Seong-cheol is in charge of the course. Kang Yeren reacts with surprise upon hearing the professor's name. He then informs them that the professor is also the homeroom teacher for Class F and, while reviewing the documents, asks the student to follow him to the classroom. Shortly after, he addresses Wolfgang as the father and asks him to wait to settle the admission fees. Laughing, Kang Yeren corrects him, clarifying that Wolfgang is actually the student. The employee apologizes for the mistake and assumes Wolfgang must be a late bloomer hunter, but she corrects him again. Completely confused, he asks who he should discuss the admission fee with. Just then, They spot someone approaching and state that this person will solve the problem. The scene shifts to a young man who despairs at the school's condition, questioning why it's in the middle of the mountains. As they walk through the campus, the employee asks if Wolfgang usually uses a weapon, and he replies that he used a great sword. The man questions the need for weapons for an F rank, but Kong Yeren explains that all ranks need to take specialization classes. She then regrets not leaving the sword with Jiho, but Wolfgang says it doesn't matter as he can summon it whenever he needs to. Surprised, Kang Yeren asks him what he means by summoning the sword. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushes past them at high speed. Startled by how close it was, Kang Yeren warns him to be more careful. The employee then recognizes the man as Professor Kim Seong-cheol. The professor then lands gently on the ground after floating for a brief moment. He then turns and asks if they were calling for him. The employee asks him to take the new student, a demon hunter candidate, to the Class F building. He then says goodbye and instructs Wolfgang to follow the professor. As he walks away, Kang Yeren says her goodbyes and tells him not to worry. She then advises him not to do anything the academy forbids, especially hitting other people. In a more serious tone, she shouts for him not to cause any trouble. Wolfgang just watches her in silence before turning to follow the professor. Worried, Kang Yeren wonders if he'll be okay and hopes he adapts well to his new life. At this, the assistant manager remarks that it looks like she's sending her son off to the army, and she reacts with annoyance. The employee approaches and asks if the two kids would like to settle the admission fee. While waiting, she comes across a mural and wonders if it's some kind of hall of fame. The assistant manager explains that those are portraits of the top graduates from each class. He then points to Kim Jin-song, the top of the 10th class, and mentions he almost surpassed him if it weren't for his physical attributes. He praises the young man's unparalleled physical strength, mentioning that he is the contractor of a foreign constellation and comes from a wealthy family. He then remarks that it's notable Kim Jin-song chose this path, since he could have had an easy life. Kang Yeren remembers him, mentioning the family-scale constellation contract, but the manager adds that he was always stressed about not satisfying his father. Curious, she asks if there's some kind of family drama involved in his story. The man then reveals that the family's obsession was to succeed as hunters, a dream forced upon him by his father. Kang Yeren then comments that he seems to know a lot about other people's business, and he deflects, saying it's an old interest of his. As the academy employee returns, he thanks everyone for waiting. He then confirms if assistant manager Kim Jun-hwan is recommending Wolfgang as a scholarship student. At this, Jun-hwan asks if the registration and tuition fees are waived for students recommended by the MU agency and asks to apply for it. The employee questions if that's how it works, and the manager replies that if he had that kind of money, he would have bought a car first. The man then informs them that he'll need additional documents and invites him into the office to sort it out. As he goes in, Jun-hwan jokes not to be left behind, and Kang Yeren urges him to just sign the papers already. Even though she's grateful he's covering the expenses, she wonders why the manager is such a hard person to like. Even after setting the matter aside, Kang Yeren remains thoughtful in front of the door. She then admits that something is bothering her about the famous hunter, Kim Jin-song. As she looks at his portrait, she wonders why he disappeared so suddenly lately. Far away, in a registration room, an employee asks a young man to wait while he prepares the documents. Then, assistant manager Kim Jun-hwan approaches to speak with the waiting young man. As he gets closer, he thinks to himself that the young man's face looks familiar. Suddenly, he recognizes him with an expression of complete shock and surprise. Unable to contain himself, he points directly at the young man, stammering as he tries to speak. Then, he shouts Kim Jin-song's name and questions what he's doing there. In her thoughts, Kang Yeren recalls that he was a highly promising elite heir to a major corporation. She then wonders why he hasn't been seen lately and is sure she's never met him in person. Still, she feels his face looks very similar to someone she knows. Elsewhere, Kim Jinwoo hesitates in front of a door, telling himself that even though he doesn't want to go in, he can't just turn back. Seeing the sign for the demon hunter specialization, he feels humiliated for having to follow this path. Suddenly, a voice comes from behind him and asks what makes him think that way. Startled, he turns around to find Professor Kim Seong-cheol, who introduces himself as the occupant of that office. The professor then confirms he is Kim Jinwoo, the student who signed up for the demon hunter specialization. He then asks what's wrong with the specialization, and Jinwoo replies that they're basically sniffer dogs. At this, the professor clarifies that while tracking is their duty, they must fight the demons before the other hunters. At that exact moment, Wolfgang appears at the door, surprising everyone. As soon as he sees him, Kim Jinwoo points and recognizes him as the bastard from that day. Wolfgang just stares back at him with a serious, impassive expression. Furious, Kim Jinwoo lunges forward and shouts, questioning how he dares to show his face. He then accuses him of making him suffer immensely because of his actions. As he attacks, Wolfgang easily intercepts Kim Jinwoo's punch. He then grabs him firmly by the wrist. With his other hand, he grabs him to immobilize him. Wolfgang then effortlessly throws him over his shoulder. He then pins him to the ground, holding his arm firmly. With that, he asks if the Holy Light Guild sent him too and says they should talk to him directly. On the ground, Kim Jinwoo yells for him to let go right now. Suddenly, the professor intervenes, extending a hand to separate them. With an aura of energy, he lifts both students into the air to stop the fight. Wolfgang then asks the professor what he thinks he's doing. He replies with a smile that he just thought he'd break them up. Then, he proposes a solution, reminding them that fighting at the academy is grounds for expulsion. The professor suggests they have an official match under his supervision, since they clearly have some history. Far away, manager Kim Jun-hwan asks Kim Jin-song how he's been, but he replies that he has no reason to tell him. At this, the manager comments that his personality hasn't changed at all and asks if he's still chasing that power. As a former friend, he advises him to stop immediately. In response, Kim Jin-song suggests he throw away his useless amulet since he can barely use it. The manager then defends his amulet, saying there's no more effective relic against someone with a demon contract. As he gets up to leave, Kim Jin-song asks them to make sure their paths don't cross again. The manager just watches him leave in silence with a serious expression. From a distance, Kang Yerin wonders if they're really friends. Back at the court, Wolfgang asks the professor about the rule of fighting using only their constellation. The professor explains that to track demons, one must adjust and utilize the power of their constellation. He then reveals he'll use this opportunity to test their skills with their respective constellations. Wolfgang asks about the consequences of fighting with other methods, and the professor warns him about expulsion. Hearing the rule, Kim Jinwoo taunts Wolfgang, asking if he signed up without even knowing that. Wolfgang then asks to ask one more question about the rules of the match. The professor clarifies that since it's a test, he'll allow other methods as long as there's no direct physical contact. He then stresses that while minor injuries are unavoidable, they must not maim or endanger their opponent's life. Finally, he turns to Kim Jinwoo and asks if he has any questions about the rules. Not caring about the rules, Kim Jinwoo tells them to just start the fight already. He then declares he can't wait to smash his opponent's face in. With that, he summons a shopping cart full of balls and warns him to watch out. He then lifts one of the balls with his energy and threatens him, saying he'll pay dearly for getting in his way. From a distance, the professor closes his eyes, anticipating the intensity of the coming attack. Then, the tennis ball transforms into a fiery projectile. He then launches it at full force toward Wolfgang. The attack hits the ground at the warrior's feet, causing a huge explosion. Amid the smoke, the ground around Wolfgang is completely scorched. With a smirk, Kim Jinwoo reveals he tried to imitate a fireball and asks what he thought. From within the smoke, Wolfgang complains that his clothes were damaged and that it's an annoyance. At this, Kim Jinwoo taunts him, suggesting he give up and beg for forgiveness. Wolfgang just says he talks too much, and the other accuses him of trying to buy time. Visibly irritated, he comments that it seems his opponent only understands things after getting beaten up. With a serious look, Wolfgang gives him 1 minute to do whatever he can. After receiving the document confirming the fee payment, Kang Yerin thanks him and says they can go. The two then walk down the long stairs of Seoul Academy, leaving the campus behind. As they walk, Kang Yerin asks if she can ask him a question, and he agrees. With that, she asks if something happened between him and that person back in their academy days, because the tension between them was strange. The manager brushes it off, saying that's just how rivals are, in a love-hate relationship. He then comments that time doesn't heal everything, even years after graduation. Kang Yerin says the situation seems complicated, and he agrees, but states that it didn't seem like they completely hated each other. She then continues down the stairs as he follows close behind. He watches her walk away, and thinks that he used to believe that too. With that, he concludes that his friend, Kim Jin-song, finds it hard to admit that reconciliation is a complicated thing. Back in the fight, Kim Jinwoo unleashes his fireball technique and asks what his opponent thought of it. Unshaken, Wolfgang grants him a minute and dares him to do his worst. Suddenly, the court explodes in a series of massive attacks. Seeing the destruction, the professor reacts, shocked by what's happening. He then runs toward Kim Jinwoo and scolds him, asking if this wasn't going too far, even after his warning. At this, Jinwoo furiously reveals that his contract with the constellation was broken because of him, and that he ruined everything. The professor ignores his complaint and warns that he'll handle the situation, but that he'd better pray the other guy isn't seriously injured. He then launches a powerful attack to contain the destruction. Amid the dust, Wolfgang complains that his clothes were ruined. He then comments on the poor durability of clothes from this era. Then, he excuses himself for a moment and prepares to act. Using a teleportation skill, he grabs the clothes from one of the researchers and asks to borrow Fenrir's pelt. He then appears on the court in his new attire, leaving the professor behind. He then throws the wolf pelt onto the ground. Surprised, Kim Jinwoo questions what skill he just used and what that animal pelt is. Then, Wolfgang gets into an attack stance and says something has been bothering him. With a serious look, he reveals that the tattoo on his opponent's arm contains demonic power. Then, he leaps into the air in a swift motion, preparing to strike. He then hits him with a powerful blow that slams him to the ground. After the impact, Wolfgang stares him down with a serious expression. In a second attack, he jumps and strikes the ground with a force that shatters it completely. Lying on the ground, Kim Jinwoo screams as he clutches his injured arm. From a distance, the professor watches the scene in shock, recognizing the energy. At that, the tattoo on his arm begins to glow intensely, and he screams again. The professor then questions why that energy is with him. Next, a shadowy, three-headed creature manifests around Kim Jinwoo. The professor quickly asks why the guardian of the underworld is bound to him. A spectral figure then warns Kim Jinwoo that he will be held accountable and that a contract with Cerberus is his only way out. At this, he refuses to make a contract with the demon, fearing the price to be paid. However, the figure insists that he must accept, or else he will die. In a panic, Kim Jinwoo yells for everyone to run, afraid they'll be devoured by the creature. Wolfgang then covers his mouth, telling him not to be afraid, because the creature will kill him. He explains that the beast feeds on fear, and assures him no one will die there. The professor adds that once empowered, the demon will demand his very lifespan as its price. With that, Wolfgang instructs him to control his breathing and look the creature directly in the eyes. From a distance, the professor despairs, realizing he can't control the situation. Wolfgang then offers to show him firsthand that demonic power is not the path to true strength. While the professor reflects on his new students, Kim Jinwoo wonders what that pelt was that he just used. Then, the wolf pelt emanates an immense energy that surprises everyone. Seeing the aura that envelops the court, Kim Jinwoo wonders what kind of power it is. Soon, the energy manifests in the form of a giant wolf, which recognizes Wolfgang by the scent on the wind. Facing the creature, Wolfgang calls him Fenrir and invites him to test if his fangs have grown dull. With Fenrir's imposing presence, the beast loses its will to fight and questions if it was summoned for something so trivial. Wolfgang then explains that he summoned him to mark a new beginning, as he has discovered that demons still roam in this era. Fenrir comments that even after 1,000 years, Wolfgang still seems to be trapped in the past. With that, he instructs him to deal with the hound himself, and says he will inform the others of his return, as Wolfgang bids him farewell. Still in shock on the ground, Kim Jinwoo questions what he just witnessed, realizing the wolf had spoken. Far from there, Kang Yeren runs hurriedly down a sidewalk. A man rushes her, complaining that a late payment messed up his whole schedule, and she agrees to walk faster. Suddenly, assistant manager Kim Jun-hwan gets her attention and asks her to look at the sky. He then points to a flying object and asks if it doesn't look familiar to her. Back on the court, Wolfgang seems confused, but believes he's on the right path as a voice announces his arrival. Immediately after, a spinning sword flies toward the court, and Wolfgang comments on the slowness of that old relic. The demonic creature senses the sword approaching and becomes utterly terrified. In an instant, Wolfgang's giant sword slams into the ground with overwhelming force. Kim Seong-chil initiates the conversation by explaining that making contracts with demons isn't illegal. It's actually a resource used by demon hunters to track them down. Even so, the professor says he doesn't understand. Kim Jinwoo's brother is a promising new generation hunter, and his father is a famous martial artist and wealthy businessman. Because of this, he asks Jinwoo directly why he made a demon contract when his family could easily obtain a sacred relic. Faced with the question, Kim Jinwoo asks if he really needs to talk about that subject. The professor warns him that he won't insist if he doesn't want to be a demon hunter. However, as his advisor, he needs an answer, because demonic contracts come with a terrible price. Next, Kim Seong-chil reveals that the terms of Jinwoo's contract with Cerberus are dangerous. They require half of his remaining life as payment. Hearing this, Wolfgang stands up in shock and points, exclaiming that the situation is much more serious than he thought. It is a contract that devours the contractor's life. With his head down, Kim Jinwoo finally asks what would happen if he were just an abandoned child. He begins to explain that his martial artist family was ecstatic when his brother made a contract with the descendant of the Barbarian's constellation. They believed they would soon become the best in Korea. Kim Jinwoo continues, explaining that this was the lifelong dream of his father, a legendary martial artist, although today he is better known as a businessman. Thus, he reveals that the contract was expanded to a family contract. It made it seem like his father's dream was finally coming true. He then recalls that while everyone was busy celebrating the family's achievement, the talentless son and major disappointment ruined everything, causing the constellation to end its contract. Back in the present, Jinwoo vents that none of this would have happened if it weren't for him. Not understanding the accusation, Wolfgang asks why that would be his fault. In a flashback, the descendant of the Barbarian's constellation manifests. It tells Wolfgang that it is not angry, as the disrespect was just the ignorance of a child who didn't recognize him. Soon after, the constellation asks for forgiveness for not knowing who he was. Back in the present, Wolfgang assures Kim Jinwoo that his punishment for challenging him ended there. What happened afterward was strictly between him and the constellation. In the flashback, Wolfgang grants his forgiveness. However, he asks the constellation if it shouldn't take action, since the child was using the power incorrectly. In response, the constellation's manifestation agrees and says it was already planning to do so. In the office, Wolfgang comments that he didn't expect that to lead to the contract's termination. He figures the constellation must have already had doubts about Jinwoo's family. With that, Kim Jinwoo stands up and yells that this is ridiculous. His brother is a genius, and if there was any flaw, the termination should have only happened to him. Wolfgang replies that since he doesn't know his brother, he can't say for sure, but at the very least, Jinwoo failed to use the power correctly. He continues, clarifying that it isn't a matter of talent, but of method. If the family uses the power the same way, they were simply incompatible with that barbarian. Indignant, Kim Jinwoo points at Wolfgang and asks how they could have used the power wrong, insisting that his brother is an absolute genius. At that moment, the office door is kicked open. Surprised, Jinwoo turns around and recognizes the person, questioning his brother. Immediately, his brother calls him trash and orders him to leave right away. The scene shifts outside, where Kang Yeren is running toward the academy building. She then yells for someone to hurry up, saying they will be in trouble if Wolfgang causes another scene. A voice replies that she was the one who told him to hurry. Meanwhile, Kim Jun-hwan, the assistant manager, appears dizzy while complaining about the stairs. Outside, as he is dragged down the hallway, Kim Jinwoo screams that he was wrong and that he will fix everything. He is then dragged out of the building while begging his older brother to stop. The scene pans out, showing the two of them crossing the academy courtyard. With that, his brother throws him forcefully onto the grass. Fallen on the ground, Jinwoo starts to cry. His brother tells him to stop crying and calls him trash, asking if terminating contracts is a hobby for him. Next, he kicks him and yells that he worked hard to get him into that school, only for him to get another contract termination. As they walk away from the commotion, Kim Seong-chul comments that because of Jinwoo, they couldn't even talk about Wolfgang. He asks if there is a problem. Wolfgang replies that the problem is huge. He states that he needs to become a demon hunter, demanding that the professor speak up if there are any obstacles. Kim Seong-chul just smiles and says that actually it's quite the opposite. A memory shows someone challenging Wolfgang in an arena, telling him to admit defeat and kneel if he can't win. Back in the present, Wolfgang asks if the professor already knew. He confirms that he felt the demonic energy earlier but needed to be sure. With an air of confidence, Kim Seong-chul states that when it comes to using a constellation's power, he is far superior to any active demon hunter. Even so, he admits that he detected the demonic energy in the student Jinwoo long after Wolfgang. Kim Seong-chul continues, revealing that although he felt the energy, he only realized its true identity when Cerberus emerged from Jinwoo's body. Furthermore, he recalls that Wolfgang used spatial distortion during the confrontation. Next, he mentions the summoning ability the Barbarian demonstrated. Finally, a technique that seemed to be telekinesis was used to control his sword. With that, the professor asks why he came to the academy. He confesses that he has never seen a hunter use such a diverse range of abilities with such ease. Bluntly, Wolfgang asks him to get straight to the point. Kim Seong-chul then suggests that he take the promotion exam as soon as it's available to get a double promotion. He claims it's the best way to get his license quickly. When the professor begins to talk about his only regret, Wolfgang interrupts him and asks him to wait. The scene returns to the courtyard, where Jinwoo's brother kicks him repeatedly while yelling that he worked hard to get him into that school. At that moment, Kang Yeren runs up and stands in front of Jinwoo, asking what he is doing. She then demands to know why he is beating his own brother like that. Annoyed, Jinwoo's brother tells her to get out of the way and asks who she thinks she is to meddle. Soon, Kim Jun-hwan arrives and holds him back. He begs Kim Jin-sung to stop, warning him that he's going to kill him, while Jin-sung yells to let him go. The manager tries to calm him down, asking why his temper has become so violent. Jin-sung shouts that it's none of his business. Suddenly, Kim Seong-chul's hand strikes Kim Jin-sung's face with a hard slap. Following the blow, Kim Jun-hwan watches in shock as Kim Jin-sung lowers his head. In the distance, Kang Yeren and Wolfgang also observe the unexpected scene. Kim Jin-sung turns his face to the side, still surprised by what happened. Holding Jin Sung's wrist, the professor reminds him that fighting outside of dungeons is strictly forbidden. Inside the academy, this behavior can easily lead to expulsion. Kim Seong-chul then adds that, above all, he can't believe Jin Sung dared to try and drag his student outside right in front of him. With a serious look, the professor strongly advises him to stop immediately. He then threatens him, saying that otherwise he could arrange an appropriate stage for the two of them, taking that as a challenge. Surprised by the statement, Kim Jin-sung asks if he really said his student. Jin-sung argues that his brother doesn't even have a contract with a constellation or a demon. He asks if the professor really intends to keep him at the academy. The professor replies that whether or not he is a contracted hunter doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with him becoming his student. After hearing the response, Kim Jin-sung stares at the professor in silence for a moment. Kim Seong-chul returns the gaze, maintaining his firm stance. Finally, Kim Jin-sung gives up and says to let his brother enroll. With that said, he turns around and begins to walk away from everyone. In the infirmary, Professor Kim Seong-chul explains that the Academy's magical healing barriers should ensure Jinwoo's swift recovery unless his injuries are critical. However, he comments that the real issue seems to be Kim Jinwoo's mental state. Kang Yerin then asks if this has something to do with his brother, the hunter Kim Jin-seong. The professor mysteriously replies that he's wondering the same thing. In a flashback, Jinwoo yells that it makes no sense. His brother is a genius, so any contract failure should have affected him alone. He then points at Wolfgang, questioning his misuse of power and reaffirming his brother's talent. Another memory shows Kim Jin-sung asking the professor if he will still accept his brother into the academy, even without a contract with a constellation or a demon. The memory ends with Jin-sung agreeing to let his brother enroll. Back in the present, Kim Seong-chul concludes that there's definitely a deeper story that only the two brothers know. Just then, Wolfgang opens the infirmary door, saying he's leaving. Seeing him with the Cerberus carcass, Kang Yerin questions him. He warns her not to touch it, as the demon still radiates a malevolent energy, even in death. Meanwhile, outside, Kim Jun-hwan asks Kim Jin-sung why he acted that way inside the academy instead of handling it at home. The manager reminds him that this is about his brother and his family, but Jin-sung retorts that for that very reason, he shouldn't meddle. Jun-hwan then asks if the change in his behavior is related to his recent disappearance, but Jin-sung cuts him off, saying he has his reasons. When the manager presses him, asking what reasons could possibly justify beating up his own family, Kim Jin-sung shouts at him to stop playing the righteous investigator. After the argument, Kim Jin-sung walks away and gets into his car. Inside, he asks Kim Jun-hwan why he stopped investigating his father. The manager replies that it was because he left the association. Jin-sung then questions if the Hunter Association knows that his father managed to get his hands on that power. Kim Jun-hwan reveals they don't know the details because he omitted them from his reports, as the association would not be happy to learn he uses demonic power. Hearing this, Jin-sung deduces he never reported it and asks if the decision was made because of him. With a conflicted look, he confesses he doesn't know whether to thank or resent the manager for that choice. Shortly after, the car drives off, leaving Kim Jun-hwan alone in the parking lot. The scene shifts to the front of the Archaeologist Hunters Association building. Inside, a man looks surprised and asks if Wolfgang really wants to make armor from the Cerberus carcass. Wolfgang confirms his wish to find a skilled blacksmith and asks for an introduction. Seeing the situation, the man asks Kang Yerin to explain the process to the Barbarian, and she wonders where she should even begin. The man then clarifies that they don't hire blacksmiths directly. Instead, they sell materials like the carcass on the association market and use the money to buy ready-made equipment. He then asks Kang Yerin to take a picture and post the item, since his commission fee on the market is too high. She agrees to list the item, but on the condition that Wolfgang helps her with her research later, sealing the deal. The man then asks what kind of equipment they should buy with the money from the sale. Wolfgang replies that since it's not for him, he can't say. Confused by his answer, the man and Kang Yerin ask who the equipment is for. In an office, Jinwoo's father is informed that the Cerberus hide has been listed on the market and that the young master has not yet returned from the academy. With a serious look, the man asks if he's sure his son hasn't come back. His subordinate confirms and reports a battle at the academy against a man named Wolfgang. It resulted in Cerberus's annihilation and Jinwoo's hospitalization after being beaten by his brother. Upon hearing Wolfgang's name, the father orders for the cleaners to be called to get rid of him discreetly. However, he changes his mind, saying that to keep Jin-sung's mind intact, they must keep Jinwoo alive at all costs. With that, he orders them to bring Jinwoo back immediately, as he will decide his son's fate himself. Just then, Kim Jin-seong appears at the door and asks them to wait. His father turns and asks how long he's been listening, but Jin-seong denies hearing anything. The man tells him not to pretend. After his son apologizes, he reveals that that person will awaken soon. He then declares that when that happens, All the power in this world will belong to their family. Hearing his father's words, Kim Jin-sung reacts with a shocked expression. He then apologizes and says he will take his leave. As soon as he's gone, the chairman orders his chief of staff to keep an eye on Jin-sung as well. The scene ends with Kim Jin-woo lying on the infirmary bed, letting out a sigh. In a flashback, Kim Jin-sung hands a piece of paper to his brother. When asked what it is, he replies that it's a Cerberus tattoo. He then instructs Jin-woo to inscribe the design on his body to form a contract with the demon. Jin-sung warns him to accept the contract no matter what Cerberus demands, as its power would help him easily reach C rank. However, Jin-woo refuses, saying he'll work hard to get a contract with another constellation. He questions how his brother could ask him to make a pact with a demon. His brother then warns him that he'll die if he doesn't, asking if he knows what happens to those who defy their father. Jin-sung then reveals that their father wouldn't hesitate to kill his own son, and that a demonic contract is the only thing that could please him. He continues, explaining that their father spent years working to awaken that power, a power that soon not even the Hunter Association will be able to ignore. Jin-woo suggests asking his friend at the association for help, arguing that the Cerberus contract demands half his life, a price far too high. With his face shadowed, his older brother simply replies that he can't do that. With tears in his eyes, he explains that if he does, his friend will surely die. He begs Jin-woo to do as he says, as it's the only way for any of them to survive. Back in the present, Jin-woo is still lying on the infirmary bed, staring at the ceiling. A tear rolls down his face as he whispers his brother's name. Suddenly, a hand shrouded in an aura begins to materialize above him. Startled, Jin-woo screams, asking if it's a ghost. From across the room, Wolfgang tells him to hold still as he tries to grab him, but Jin-woo panics and yells for him to let go. Later that night, Kim Jin-sung kneels outside the academy. He then runs up the stairs, determined to act quickly before his father makes the next move. In his office, Professor Kim Seong-cheol stretches in his chair, noticing how late it's gotten. Suddenly, Kim Jin-seong rushes in. Not understanding the situation, Kim Seong-cheol wonders why Jin-sung would be there. Meanwhile, Kim Jin-seong enters the academy's infirmary, where a blue aura emanates from one of the beds. He peeks through the doorway, believing his brother should be there. Carefully, he pulls back the curtain surrounding the bed. To his surprise, it's empty. He wonders if his brother really isn't there. Frustrated that he didn't expect him to have left already, Jin-seong wonders where his brother could have gone. Just then, an aura of energy envelops him and lifts him into the air, making him cry out in shock. Seeing Kim Seong-cheol at the door, he recognizes him. The professor confirms that his suspicions about him were correct. He then orders Kim Jin-seong to come with him quietly, unless he wants to make a scene. Elsewhere, Kim Jin-woo is cornered, asking in fear who the person approaching him is. At this, Wolfgang declares he will make Jin-woo his first subordinate. He then tells him to take off his clothes so he can take his measurements, leaving Jin-woo completely confused. Wolfgang then asks Kim Jin-woo if he'd rather make a contract, offering to persuade the Barbarian's descendant to contract with him again if he proves himself worthy. Surprised by the offer, Jin-woo asks if he can really get a new contract with the Barbarian's descendant. Wolfgang clarifies that he can't offer any guarantees, but if Jin-woo becomes a warrior the constellation can respect, they'll have a justification. Hearing this condition, Kim Jin-woo's expression fills with newfound hope. After a brief moment of hesitation, he lets out a sigh and makes his decision. He then kneels before Wolfgang and begs him to teach him, asking what kind of warrior he needs to become. With an imposing gaze, Wolfgang declares that from this moment on, he will be reborn as the ultimate shield warrior. Confused by the title, Kim Jin-woo asks what kind of warrior that is. After taking his measurements, the young man asks if they just need to find some gear that fits, and Wolfgang confirms. Wolfgang then specifies that he needs a huge shield to match his size, and nothing else matters. The young man then reports that, coincidentally, they've just received a purchase order for the Cerberus carcass, so they should be able to get a shield right away. Still, Wolfgang says he'd rather take a look himself, and when asked, confirms he wants to go right now. While carrying the carcass, Kim Jin-woo wonders who could have bought the item from the market. With a worried expression, he tells himself he hopes it wasn't his father. Back at the association, Kang Yerin tells her colleague she got a message from the academy's professor. The scene shifts to the professor's office, where he places his cell phone on the desk. With Kim Jin-sung in front of him, the professor steps closer and tells him to start talking. He then asks if he got another demon's mark and is trying to force his brother into a new contract, questioning if he has any idea of the terrible price behind it. Seeing that Jin-sung has no intention of answering, The professor says he understands this is for everyone's good. With that, he suggests that running away won't solve anything and offers to help, but Jinsung refuses, stating the professor can't handle the situation. The professor then informs him that Jinu is with the archaeologist hunters, and he can find him by contacting Junhwan, but that he will no longer accept Jinu at the academy. Outraged, Jin Seong grabs him and shouts, reminding him that he had promised to accept him. Finally, Kim Seongchul explains that a demon hunter must be prepared to die, and asks how he can trust someone who treats the academy as just a shelter. The professor then offers to help Jinsung use the academy as a shelter, but demands he first explain what's happening with the brothers. At this, Jinsung begins to tell an old story, revealing that despite being a renowned martial artist, his father was never chosen by a constellation. He continues, explaining that his own contract with a foreign constellation was recently terminated, proving what his father always said, that there are things money can't buy. Next, Jinsung reveals he received his first invitation in 15 years to a high-ranking hunter club, but was uninvited as soon as they learned of his contract's termination. He then states that his father isn't the type of man to let a humiliation like this slide, and that the professor surely understands what that means. Hearing the story, Kim Seong-chul deduces that, to gain power, his father made a contract with an incredibly powerful demon. Jinsung confirms, saying only the Hunters Association can stop his father, who is obsessed with demonic power, but he questions if they will actually take action. The professor then asks why he treated Jinu that way, questioning if it was really necessary to push his own brother so hard. With that, Jinseong reveals their father has already been completely consumed by corruption, and that he offered demonic power to Jinu to prevent their father from killing him. He then confesses that by beating Jinu, he wanted to end the matter with his own hands before his father did. Right after, he reveals his father has summoned the cleaners, and that their target is set. Shocked, the professor slams the table and yells that the cleaners are a criminal group where every member is at the level of an A-rank hunter. Jinsung just reaffirms what he said, stating that's why not even the professor would be able to handle the situation. He concludes by saying he won't make excuses for what he did, as he did the best he could, believing it was better than letting Jinu die. Defeated, the professor sits down and admits that if all of this is true, then not even he can handle the situation. Jinsung laments, saying that if his contract with the constellation had remained intact, none of this would have happened, and his father wouldn't have changed so much. The professor then says that, even so, regardless of what Jinu did wrong, he couldn't just stand by and watch a father hurt his own son. With a determined expression, Jinsung declares that whatever it takes, he must resolve the situation, as it's a family matter. The scene moves to the next day. Kim Jinwoo appears with a tired expression. Then, the young man from the association hands him a shield, saying that while it's not a holy relic, it's still very good and he's sure he'll make good use of it. Wolfgang then easily takes the shield and comments that it's light and sturdy, perfect as a first shield. Even so, Jinwoo complains that seeing it in person, the shield seems very dull compared to weapons like swords, spears, or hammers. At this, Wolfgang warns him, saying he needs to know his own limits because with any other weapon, he wouldn't even be able to scratch a demon. He then explains that with a shield, it's a different story, since by focusing on defense, he can guarantee his survival, which leads Jinwoo to ask if he's calling him weak. Without hesitation, Wolfgang replies yes, and states that he's not using his full strength. In a flashback, he comments that Jinwoo's fists certainly pack a good punch. However, he clarifies that a demon can't be defeated with simple punches, and that he needs to learn how to channel his entire body's strength at the right moment. Wolfgang concludes, saying that if Jinwoo could do that, he wouldn't have resorted to demonic power when he was caught from behind during the duel. Back in the present, Kim Jinwoo stares at the shield in silence, processing the barbarian's words. The scene shifts to the estate of Chairman Kim Taegwan, the father of Jin Seong and Jinu. Inside the mansion, someone descends a dark staircase toward a basement. Down below, Chairman Kim prepares to begin a dark ritual in front of two other people. With a furious look, he curses the bastards from the Hunters Association and his useless sons, declaring he doesn't need any of them to reach the top. He then clenches his bloodied fist and lets his blood drip into a chalice. The drops of blood mix with the red liquid already filling the vessel. With that, a huge magic circle materializes on the floor around him. The chairman then raises the chalice and shouts, offering the blood of his humble servant to the great Father of Darkness. He continues his prayer, asking for the entity to look upon this old world full of hypocrisy. With the sky darkening outside, he cries out for the rotten order of light to be destroyed and for the red eye of the heavens to open. Nearby, the two guests watch with excitement, believing they too will become strong and make a fortune when the chairman gains his power. The chairman then offers their flesh and blood as a sacrifice for the ritual. He continues the chant, commanding the sealed gate of the abyss to open and allow the descent of the Dark Lord. At that moment, a shapeless, bloody mass begins to emerge violently from within the chalice. With an ecstatic look, the chairman watches the manifestation of the entity he has summoned. Without warning, the mass of dark energy lurches forward and slams into the chairman's face. With a choked cry, the man's eye glows with a demonic mark. Seeing this, his guests back away in a panic, telling him to wait. Then, a scream of agony echoes through the basement as energy tentacles spread across the floor. In the chairman's place, a gigantic chained demonic creature materializes before the two of them. As the man questions if that being is still the chairman, his female companion beside him is pierced by a surprise attack. Blood splatters on the guest's face as he watches the scene in complete horror. Fallen, the man calls out for his partner, asking where she is. The demon opens its mouth to devour. Moments later, it lifts the woman's lifeless body, impaled on its chains. The creature's red eye fixes on the last survivor. Far away, Kim Jin-sung senses something has gone wrong and yells for someone to get help quickly. Suddenly, a voice appears in Kim Jin-woo's mind, begging for his son or anyone to call someone who can stop this. The voice then completes the desperate plea, telling them to hurry while he is still conscious. Atop a building, Kim Sung-cheol and Kim Jin-sung watch the sky as the moon turns red and the earth trembles beneath their feet. In desperation, the professor screams, asking what's happening, while Jin-sung can only think that this can't be real. Just then, Kim Jin-sung's cell phone starts to vibrate. On the other end of the line, the chief of staff yells in a panic, warning young Master Jin-sung that they are facing a major crisis. Answering the call, Jin-sung hears about the president and realizes his father has finally started to act. The scene shifts to the basement of the Archaeologist Hunters Association, where Wolfgang and Kim Jin-woo are preparing to train. Jin-woo complains about the dusty place, and Wolfgang explains that as archaeologist hunters, they don't have a proper space for combat training. With that, Wolfgang tells his subordinate number 1 to calm down as he gets too excited in battle and loses his balance. Then, a memory reminds him of how he always leaves himself open for a counterattack. Even so, he takes a deep breath and composes himself, saying he'll try. Soon, Kim Jin-woo raises his shield, preparing his stance for the training. Wolfgang then instructs him to stay calm and keep a low stance, warning that they'll start with a light blow. The next moment, the Barbarian unleashes a powerful punch against Jin-woo's shield. Kang Yeren is thrown back by the impact, wondering to herself why a simple punch sounded like an explosion. His face contorted by the force, Jin-woo struggles to withstand the power of the blow. The shockwave from the punch hurls Jin-woo backward, destroying boxes and scattering debris across the warehouse. Panting, Kim Jin-woo can hardly believe it and asks if that was really a light blow. Wolfgang then cracks his knuckles and says it wasn't bad, since he at least managed to stay on his feet, even though it was just a tap. As the dust and paper settle, Jin-woo is left speechless by the mess made in the area. Next, Wolfgang instructs him to memorize that feeling and stance, saying he'll watch from the side, and Jin-woo agrees. Kang Yeren comments that at least he takes his training seriously, and Wolfgang adds that he's a skilled hunter who scored over 2,000 points on the promotion exam. With a smile, she asks if he's talking about the machine Jin-woo broke the moment he used a little strength. At that moment, a cell phone on a nearby table starts to ring. Without hesitating, Kim Jin-woo walks over and answers the call. Seeing this, Wolfgang comments on how easily he loses focus, but Kang Yeren defends him, saying she wants to encourage him since he's just starting out. Suddenly, Jin-woo yells into the phone, asking what the person on the other end said. He then confirms he understands and will go immediately, running off while apologizing for having to go home. Not understanding the situation, Kang Yeren asks what's going on, and Wolfgang replies that he has a bad feeling about it. Far away, Professor Kim Seong-cheol shouts in shock, questioning if he really performed a demonic descent ritual. He then asks if it wasn't just a simple contract, and upon receiving confirmation, he curses the situation. The chief of staff reports that when he left, the president was still conscious, and asks if they can stop him if they hurry. At this, Jin-sung says he'll go alone, as it's a family matter, but the professor refuses, stating that a demonic descent is no longer a family problem and that he will go with him. The professor insists, saying a powerful hunter like him will make the association move much faster, as they wouldn't pay attention to a report from anyone else. Desperate, the chief of staff says he's going too, because his wife is still there, and Jin-sung tells him to calm down and call anyone else who can help. Immediately after, the three of them start running at high speed through the city streets. Back at the warehouse, Wolfgang states that something is wrong and he needs to leave because of a bad feeling. While cleaning up the mess, Kang Yeren jokes, asking if he's trying to get out of work, but he denies it. Wolfgang then walks toward the warehouse exit. Outside, the two look up at the sky, which has suddenly darkened, and Kang Yeren questions why this is happening in broad daylight. With his gaze fixed on the sky, Wolfgang senses a sinister energy in the air. He then tells her it seems a demon has appeared, leaving her shocked by the news. Wolfgang asks why that would be impossible, recalling that subordinate number 1 also made a contract, but she argues that a demon appearing on the surface is something else entirely. Even so, he replies that he doubts things will stay this way from now on. With an aura of power surrounding him, Wolfgang concludes that it seems they are beginning a full-scale invasion after waiting for 1,000 years. Desperate, Kim Jin-song runs through the streets praying he can make it in time. Soon after, he reaches the door of his family's mansion. As he gets closer, he shouts in fear, asking what's happening there. Without warning, chains of red energy shatter the front door. Next, the energy completely destroys the home's foyer. A huge explosion of energy erupts from inside the property. Shielding himself from the blast, Jin-song wonders if he's too late, calling out for his father. Suddenly, something in the sky catches his attention. Even without understanding, he wonders what it could be. Soon, everyone watches as a gigantic energy sword descends from the heavens toward the city. The colossal weapon strikes the ground with devastating force. Facing the threat, Wolfgang draws his sword and orders Yeren to evacuate to a safe place. At this, she tells him to be careful, warning that the Hunters Association is already on its way. Without hesitation, he propels his body forward. Then, Wolfgang leaps toward the energy, his own weapon in hand. Amidst the destruction, Wolfgang tells the demons to wait because the last barbarian is coming for them. The scene shows fire and destruction spreading across the battle site. Elsewhere in the city, Kim Jin-song appears, panting and wounded amidst the wreckage. He then screams for his father not to succumb to the demon and to wake up. Suddenly, a chain of energy shoots toward him from the darkness. With that, the chain pierces through his body. Then, a demonic voice informs him that this man is no longer his father. Facing the creature, Jin-song falls to his knees as the voice tells him not to despair. Finally, the demon reveals that, starting with his father, it will slaughter every last human being. Chained and trapped, Kim Jin-song screams. He questions how his father could end up like this, begging him to come to his senses. In response, the demon calls him a fool for still clinging to the dead and tells him to just die as it launches an attack. His face twisted in pain, Jin-song refuses to accept the end, declaring he can't die like this. In that instant, Kim Jin-woo suddenly appears and blocks the attack with his shield. Seeing his younger brother protecting him, a shocked Jin-song asks what he's doing there. With a determined smile, Jin-woo tells his brother not to worry. This time, he will protect him. The scene shifts to the Guxiang dungeon in China, where a hunter tells his partner they're almost done. Immediately after, a monster attacks the pair with a sharp cry. The female hunter identifies the attack as a dragon's breath and yells for her partner, Shihao, to get behind her. With that, she conjures an energy barrier that withstands the impact of the fiery blast. Seeing that Yang Yang blocked the attack, the hunter charges forward to counterattack. He then leaps over the monster, preparing to deliver the final blow. With a war cry, he drives his spear into the creature's head, declaring that this ends here. Struck, the monster lets out a final screech of pain and is defeated. With the battle over, the two hunters celebrate, cheering that they've cleared an A-rank dungeon. Striking a victory pose, the pair of hunters celebrate, shouting that they truly are the best. As the female hunter smiles, her partner says the elders will finally recognize them now, then stabs her. Confused, she can only react as she spits up blood. With that, the hunter holds his partner's body as she collapses, lifeless. The next instant, he too is stabbed and screams, demanding the attacker reveal themselves. With a final breath, he can barely react to the attack. Soon, a mysterious assassin appears before the fallen bodies of the two hunters. He then comments that the two A-rankers barely put up a fight, and that he's moving to the next target's location immediately. Next, the assassin looks at a photo of Wolfgang on his phone. On top of a building, Wolfgang says he doesn't know why the sky suddenly changed, but the chaos only plays to his advantage. Far away, the assassin notes his next target is just an F rank, but there must be something special about him for a kill contract to be issued. With that, he declares he'll finish him in a single, clean blow. Wolfgang then defends himself from a surprise attack that explodes against his sword. From the impact, he's enveloped in a dark aura and retreats. Kneeling on the ground after the attack, Wolfgang coughs as the assassin watches from above. As the assassin reports the target's elimination, his constellation warns him to retreat immediately, leaving him confused by the message. Suddenly, Wolfgang appears, and the assassin panics. Then, he cuts him down as if he were nothing. Spitting blood, the assassin boasts that Wolfgang may have defended against one target, but he definitely inhaled the poison. With a threatening gaze, Wolfgang declares he is no one's target but the hunter, and warns him not to interfere with his hunt. Meanwhile, back at the main battle, energy chains surge across the battlefield. Kim Jin-woo manages to block the attack with his shield, resisting the impact of the chains. When his brother asks, he assures him he's fine, remembering Wolfgang's instructions to keep his calm and posture. With a monster approaching from behind, Jinwoo thinks that he just has to hold on until other hunters arrive to help. Then a demon attacks them, and the impact of the attack hurls the brothers through the air. Jinwoo quickly runs to protect his fallen brother, asking if he's okay and what that thing is. Looking around amidst the chaos, he wonders where all these monsters came from. The scene pulls back to reveal the giant demon on a cliff, watching the destruction spread across the city. The battlefield transforms into an abyss of fire and broken rock. From the cracked ground, a monstrous hand emerges amidst the flames. Soon after, hordes of demons of all shapes and sizes begin to emerge from the abyss. Trembling, Kim Jinwoo can hardly believe the absurd number of monsters that have appeared. With a roar, the creatures charge toward the brothers. With a determined look, he tells himself to get a grip, because if he gives up now, his brother will die. The next moment, Jinwoo throws himself in front of his brother and blocks a golem's punch with his shield. His face twisted with effort, he struggles to withstand the impact of the blow. Exhausted on the ground, he tells himself he has to hold on. With a furious shout, he gets back up, determined to hold out until the other hunters arrive. He then defends himself from a demon's blow. He quickly turns and blocks another creature's attack with his shield. He then lunges forward and hits a slimy monster with a powerful shield bash. He continues to fight, landing a punch on another creature. With no time to rest, a tentacled monster lunges at him. With a cry of pain, Jinwoo is hit head-on, his shield shattering from the attack. Fallen on the ground, Jinwoo refuses to give up, repeating to himself that he must protect his brother. Even so, the tentacled creature moves in to deliver the final blow. With the remains of his shield, he prepares to block the attack with all his might. Suddenly, he looks past the monster, wondering what has just appeared. An instant later, a giant sword pins the creature to the ground, killing it instantly. A voice then praises his #1 subordinate, saying he held on well until the end. In the middle of the battlefield, Wolfgang appears to protect the two brothers. He then declares that Jinwoo is truly a man worthy of holding a shield and protecting his allies. Relieved, Jinwoo can only call out Wolfgang's name upon seeing him, sword in hand. Before them, a horde of grotesque-looking demons prepares to attack. Wolfgang's eyes glow with intense energy. He then lets out a powerful roar, unleashing all his strength. With a single blow, the barbarian unleashes a wave of energy that sweeps across the battlefield. The energy manifests as wolves that destroy every demon in their path. Finally, a voice tells Jinwoo to rest as an aura envelops him. The giant demon attacks, launching its energy chains toward its targets. But Wolfgang charges at the demon. Filled with absolute hatred, Wolfgang declares he'll take it from here. As they fight, Wolfgang demands to know what the demon knows about Devil House. He promises a clean death in exchange for the information. In response, the demon finds the human's words amusing and wonders how a mere insect dares to speak to him that way. Wolfgang warns him that he's been given a chance to die peacefully. If he refuses to talk, he'll be eliminated. With that, the creature calls him a filthy insect and challenges him to try and kill him if he thinks he can. The demon then launches a shadow attack, moving to trap Wolfgang. As he's caught, Wolfgang scoffs at the use of such cheap tricks. The creature then orders the arrogant human to be crushed by the power of the shadows. Wolfgang cries out in pain as the technique crushes him. Suddenly, the energy intensifies, causing the demon to scream as well. Surprised, the demon wonders about the source of this immense energy. The shadow restraints begin to cut into the barbarian's body. With that, his blood begins to gush from the wounds. Even so, an aura of blue energy emanates from his body, breaking the restraints. The demon questions how he broke free from the shadow, realizing Wolfgang is no ordinary human. Then, a powerful blue energy attack cuts through the ground in front of him. With his eyes glowing red, Wolfgang spins and unleashes a powerful blow with his sword. The blade, covered in a blue energy aura, strikes the demon square in the chest. Startled by the attack, the demon cries out in pain. The impact of the sword throws the creature backward, breaking the chains that held it. Facing his enemy, Wolfgang points at him and says he is weak, so weak that his name isn't even worth remembering. Enraged by the human's audacity, the demon Umbrax orders his servants to kill him. With that, a giant stone golem materializes and advances toward Wolfgang. Carrying his brother on his shoulders, Kim Jinwoo yells for Wolfgang to watch out. The golem then raises its stone fist and delivers a crushing blow toward the barbarian. Despite the attack, Wolfgang simply glares at it, his face filled with fury. Without moving, he destroys the golem with a single punch. Watching this, Jinwoo can only gasp in astonishment. In complete shock, he stammers as the narration reveals that, on that day, Jinwoo was sure of one thing. The narration continues, explaining that he absolutely had to stay on Wolfgang's good side. Suddenly, the golem's remains fly toward Jinwoo, making him scream in surprise. Wolfgang turns and snaps at his #1 subordinate, asking what he's doing. He orders him to hurry up and get his brother to safety. With a relieved smile, Kim Jinwoo agrees, thinking to himself how glad he is they're on the same side. Meanwhile, the demon wonders where that man suddenly came from and regrets having to use a power he didn't want to reveal yet. A moment later, a red energy aura begins to manifest around the demon. With that, the demon evolves, revealing its new form, Umbra's Shadow of Evolution. Faced with this transformation, Wolfgang merely comments that his opponent has a varied skill set. In response, the creature challenges him to see how long he can keep up that act, then attacks with shadow blades. With agility, Wolfgang blocks one of the attacks coming his way. The demon then continues its advance with a barrage of rapid strikes. Suddenly, Jinwoo screams in terror. His body is dispersing like smoke. He accuses the demon of cheating. Unfazed, the creature continues its relentless attack against the barbarian. Next, the demon questions if Wolfgang really thought he could kill him with that level of power. Wolfgang then calmly replies that he believes he can kill him easily, even at that level. Shocked by the human's confidence, the demon can barely finish its sentence. Furious with his opponent's arrogance, the creature prepares for another attack. With a furious cry, the demon calls him a filthy insect and orders him to just die. In a flashback, an older barbarian asks his companion, Jonas, if he's heard the rumors about demons that are immune to attacks. The older barbarian tells Wolfgang not to be afraid. Wolfgang retorts, but his master cuts him off, claiming the demons will be useless against his warhammer, blessed with the lightning of angels. Back in the present, Wolfgang blocks the demon's attack with a glowing warhammer. Surprised, the demon wonders how a human is deflecting its attack. Then, it realizes the weapon is blessed by an angel. With the weapon in hand, Wolfgang mentally thanks his old companion, Jonas. The creature glares at its opponent with fury. Next, Wolfgang attacks the demon with the full force of his warhammer. The impact of the weapon generates an explosion of energy. Struck squarely, the creature staggers back. In a rage, the demon calls him a bastard and realizes that this won't work. With that, Wolfgang asks one last time where Devil House is. The creature then curses the situation as its shadow form detaches and tries to flee. While the creature thinks that it can't believe it was defeated by a pathetic human, Wolfgang stands over the demon's defeated body. Demanding an answer, Wolfgang smashes the ground with his hammer in a final attack. With the impact of the blow, the creature's shadow form is thrown far away. Right after the hammer is thrown at the creature, which falls toward the fiery abyss. Seeing the demon fall, Jinwoo runs to Wolfgang with his brother on his shoulders and asks if he's okay. Wolfgang then laments, as that was his only lead on Devil House's whereabouts. At the same time, a group of hunters finally arrives at the scene of the devastation. Among them, a woman in a formal suit stands out as she walks through the destroyed terrain. With authority, she points toward the aftermath and orders everyone to quickly eliminate the remaining monsters. The hunters move in and begin fighting the creatures still on sight. Right after, the woman approaches and stops in front of Wolfgang. Wolfgang gets straight to the point and asks who she is. She then introduces herself as Choi Yunha, the vice president of the Hunters Association, and informs him that her hunters will take care of the remaining monsters. With that, she extends her hand and invites him to come to the Hunters Association if he wants information about the demon Devil House. The scene shifts to the Hunters Association building. As he enters a room, a man greets him, confirming he is indeed Mr. Wolfgang. The host then introduces himself as Lee Jong-hwan, the president of the Hunters Association. With a handshake, the barbarian also reveals his name, Wolfgang. The president then sizes him up, acknowledging his impressive strength and physique. Wolfgang gets straight to the point and asks what he wants. Lee Jong-hwan agrees to answer immediately. The president then reveals that the demon's base, the Devil House, is located in Underhell. Upon hearing the name, Wolfgang repeats the word Underhell in a serious tone. Lee Jong-hwan explains that demons are vulnerable to sunlight, which is why they hide in Underhell, a place infested with them. Wolfgang cuts him off, saying he already knows what the place is and demands the entrance's location, but the president insists he isn't finished speaking. He then changes the subject, recalling the day Wolfgang destroyed a sacred relic at the Hunter promotion test site. Lee Jong-hwan continues, adding that he also destroyed the barrier that kept the Slime King under control, allowing it to escape. Furthermore, the president mentions that a demon was summoned at the academy right in front of the barbarian. He goes on, citing how Wolfgang subdued the Cleaners, a group of increasingly powerful assassins. Finally, he points out that the barbarian emerged unscathed from his confrontation with the demon Umbrax, making Wolfgang wonder where he's going with this conversation. Lee Jong-hwan questions him about the coincidences, citing the emergence of a powerful figure who made a contract with a constellation and soon became involved with demons. For this reason, the president declares that he needs to verify Mr. Wolfgang's true identity and purpose. Thus, the constellation Son of Hwanung summons an altar called the Chamsongdan altar. The summoned figure reveals itself to be the constellation Son of Hwanung, Dangun Wangjum. Faced with this situation, Wolfgang asks if he's being accused of allying with demons. The president replies that's not quite it, as an energy envelops him. He then clarifies that his intention is merely to investigate his identity a little. Outside, the assistant comments that it must be time for them to leave. A mental image from the assistant shows how she imagines the rigorous investigation being conducted by the president. Suddenly, the woman turns to the room and asks if they're done yet. At that same moment, a blade of energy strikes and dispels the president's manifestation. Shocked, the assistant screams for the president, who appears breathless and on his knees. With an aura surrounding him, Wolfgang states that the so-called president of the association is too weak. The assistant then steps in front of him and demands that Wolfgang show some respect, reminding him that the president is the pinnacle of hunters in South Korea. As a blade of energy forms in his hand, Wolfgang simply replies that he called the weak. Outraged, the assistant calls him a bastard. In response, the constellation Concubine of Emperor Xuanzong manifests according to the contractor's will. The president then shouts for the association's vice president not to do anything, as that man is dangerous. As soon as she appears, the constellation attempts to use a dominant seduction skill on the target. The woman envelops him with her presence and kisses him. Possessing Wolfgang's body, the constellation turns and questions how they dare direct such words at the president, calling him an insignificant human. With that, the vice president turns and informs her superior that she has dealt with him. The president, however, yells for the vice president to watch out for what's right behind her. She turns around, confused, and asks what's wrong. The president just curls up on the floor. As the president groans in pain, Wolfgang turns and walks toward him. The barbarian then demands they tell him the information about Underhell. The scene shifts to a fortress located in the third-floor area of Underhell. Inside a large throne room, a small creature stands in the center. The demon Umbrax then addresses his friend Devilhouse and says he needs a favor. Sitting on his throne, the hooded demon questions since when they were friends. Umbrax then asks if he's still holding on to the past. The hooded figure recalls that 1,000 years ago, the words of the bastard who took his territory were not the same when he lost his army. To change the subject, Umbrax offers an interesting piece of information about a barbarian he met on the surface who was looking for him. The demon on the throne understands and agrees to help, stating he already knows he wants safe passage through his territory. He then beckons him closer. Umbrax thanks him and promises to help him reach even lower areas of Underhell once he recovers. Holding the small creature in his hand, the hooded figure repeats the words, lower areas, finding the proposal grandiose. Suddenly, an energy envelops Umbrax, who frightenedly asks what the bastard intends to do. As he is turned to stone by absolute petrification, Umbrax curses him. The demon on the throne just laughs. Revealing his true form, he holds the petrified body and calls Umbrax a fool for believing a demon's word. He then calls him a pathetic creature and hurls him toward a horde of monsters. The crowd of creatures swarms the petrified body and shatters it. The monsters completely devour the remains of the small creature. In the end, only a skeletal hand and a sword are left behind on the ground. Leaving the matter aside, the demon comments on the fact that the barbarian is still alive. He then curses the damned barbarian. Back in the office, Wolfgang states that they aren't strong enough to fight the demons, making the vice president question if there's no one stronger. The president explains that he is among the strongest in South Korea. With that, Wolfgang says he has no choice but to descend into Underhell alone. At this, Lee Jong-hwan tries to calm him down, saying there's no need to rush, as the appearance of a demon was a rare situation, and there won't be any immediate problems. Wolfgang, however, looks outside and says something is strange. The president asks if there's some kind of problem. The barbarian then questions why the darkness hasn't dissipated, even after so much time since the demon was defeated. In that same instant, a pressure hits the room, making the president ask what it is. Wolfgang then recognizes the energy spreading through the area. Shortly after, a rift of energy opens in the middle of the room. From it, the demon Volcalas emerges in Seoul. At the same time, in Daejeon, the demon Batwing appears. Meanwhile, in Paju, the demon Astaroth also manifests. The president asks what's going on, and Wolfgang confirms it's a demon. Without hesitation, the barbarian leaps through the broken window toward the city. As he falls, he summons his energy axe. Landing on another building, the impact of his strength shatters the roof. As demons emerge one after another, he swiftly leaps between buildings. With every move, he wonders if the demon invasion has begun again. Wolfgang then crashes through another window, considering the whole situation highly unusual. Back in the office, the vice president remarks that it makes no sense, recalling that he'd said they were on the 75th floor. The president asks what they should do, and his assistant tells them to hurry and catch up to him. The scene then changes to 10 minutes earlier, at the residence of the Blue Dragon family. There, a young woman named Go Yun-ah, the family's successor, was training with her spear. With a swift movement, she charges a wooden dummy. Her precise strike completely destroys the training target. Even so, the girl tells herself it's not enough and that she needs to be much stronger. As the successor, she thinks about the Blue Dragon family's reputation for producing famous hunters, like Master Go Xiangyang. She then notices a constellation's aura and regrets getting distracted by the achievements of others, concluding that the Blue Dragon family is on another level. However, the constellation Blue Rose Lancer announces its disappointment with her performance and terminates the contract. With that, she decides she must dedicate herself even more to get a new chance and secure another contract. She then notices the wound on her hand from gripping the spear so tightly. Soon a man praises her for her excellent form and says it's almost time to pass the family's leadership to her. The girl calls him father, and Go Seong-yang, the master of the Blue Dragon family, states that he would have no regrets if he died today. Yuna tells him to stop, knowing she still has a long way to go and needs to be recognized by the constellation again. Her father then pinches her cheek and asks when she grew up so much, making her tell him to cut it out. Go Xiangyang then changes the subject, asking if something is happening, as it seems very noisy outside. Suddenly, they both look to the side with serious expressions. From above, something is rapidly approaching the residence. The successor turns toward the entrance. The demon Astaroth descends from the sky at high speed, heading straight for them. Her father recognizes the approaching creature. Immediately, Go Xiangyang gets into a fighting stance and orders Yuna to get back inside and contact the Hunters Association. The demon introduces herself and, first things first, asks where the Barbarian is. In a flashback, Devil House orders the three demons to go to the surface and find the Barbarian. Volcalas then asks his lord how they're supposed to find him if the only information they have is that he's a barbarian. Devil House replies that he's the biggest idiot who just charges in swinging his weapon and promises a reward if they find him and bring him to him. Back in the present, Volcalas wonders how he'll find this human and what kind of fool would dare charge at him. The demon then roars through the city. At that same moment, Wolfgang charges toward him, yelling as he leaps between buildings. Seeing him, Volcalas remarks that the description was surprisingly accurate. As Wolfgang scales a building, the demon asks where he thinks he's going. Volcalas then declares that he, and not the others, will be the one to claim the reward. With that, the monster launches a powerful energy punch at the hunter. Meanwhile, in Paju, Go Xiangyang has been defeated and is on his knees before Astaroth. He questions how an S-rank hunter like himself could be defeated so easily. Astaroth praises his strength and demands information, but he just tells her not to make him laugh. With that, the demon says she'll see how much he can take, making him scream in pain. Yuna runs outside, shouting that she's already contacted the association. Astaroth squeezes Go Xiangyang's neck as he struggles to breathe. In despair, the girl screams for her father's life. The demon just responds with a cruel, menacing smile. The successor then hesitates, telling herself to wait a moment. She quickly concludes that, without a contract, charging in now would be a meaningless death. With her body in poor condition and her contract terminated, she thinks she couldn't do what even her father failed to do. The young woman then wonders if the right thing to do isn't to wait for the Hunters Association. Her father continues to be choked by the demon. With his last bit of strength, he tells Yuna that it's okay. Then, the master tells his daughter to stay safe. Astaroth sentences him to death if he has no intention of talking, making him choke. At the exact moment of the blow, Yuna appears and blocks the attack with her energy spear. The demon turns in surprise, wondering how she got there. With a war cry, the girl charges forward with all her strength. The attack throws the girl backward, but it lands a direct hit on the demon. Astaroth then screams in pain as she's struck by the blow. The successor then retreats to her father's side. She supports him with one arm, holding her spear in the other hand. The family master apologizes for making her intervene and tells her to fall back, as this opponent is beyond her. Yuna refuses, stating she will face the demon and that she is the one who should be sorry. With that, she remembers her promise not to just stand by like a fool anymore. She then reinforces to herself that she would seize this opportunity and not run away in fear. In an internal monologue, the girl orders herself to stop looking for excuses to give up. She clenches her fist tightly, repeating to herself, "Never again, never again." Moved by this attitude, the Blue Rose Lancer constellation is deeply touched by Go Yuna's resolve. The entity then pays homage to the heart that does not crumble in the face of fear. Soon, The Blue Rose Lancer constellation proposes a formal contract to Go Yuna. The girl accepts and declares that she will never waver again, becoming the new contractor of the Blue Rose Lancer. Irritated, Astaroth curses the terrible timing of her contract and vows to kill her right then and there. In a fighting stance, an aura envelops the successor of the Blue Dragon family. Then, she activates the Water Walk skill, creating clones of herself that surround the demon. Surprised, Astaroth wonders how this is possible. Soon, one of the clones charges at her with spear in hand. The girl then delivers a final blow, the Spear of Penetration, which pierces the demon's body clean through.